Hello, hello. Okay. All right. I think we're going to get ready to get started. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to all who is gathered here this evening. My name's Joanne Johnson. I will be performing the duties of presiding co-chair in the absence of Dr. Jerry Cruz, who couldn't be with us tonight. Our third co-chair is Shadia Massey, and she also can't be with us this evening. The January Massey Commission meeting will be called to order. We have a full agenda that includes some voting that we will move to later in the evening when it is clear that a quorum is present. We are moving the agenda around a bit to accommodate that. We're going to leave that vote, that resolution, to the end of the meeting so we can make sure we have enough voting members present. So we'll start with the approval of the minutes. Commissioners, you've had the opportunity to review the meeting minutes from our December meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? Okay, seeing none. If not, is there a motion to approve the minutes from the December meeting? Kristen, first, okay, and Susan with the second. All in favor, say aye. Okay, the motion is approved. Now we're going to move on to work group reports and or comments. I will ask the commissioner from each of our work groups or serving and leading our work groups to present a brief 2-minute verbal report on their most recent gathering. We will start with Sunshine Clemens with the Law Enforcement Hiring, Training, Wellness, and Cultural Competency Group.
Thank you. Our January 6th work group meeting actually had to be rescheduled due to the weather. So we have not met since our last meeting. We have rescheduled that meeting for this Wednesday, the 15th at CAP 1908, 1100 South Grand Avenue East here in Springfield at 5:30.
All right, thank you, Sunshine. Now we'll move on to Brian, Integrated Mental Health Services and Emergency Response Group.
Our meeting is going to be on the 16th of this month. Since the last meeting, we submitted, if that's the right term, our progress report for the quarter. I will just mention that if you haven't done it for your work group, I found it helpful to force us to organize some of the direction we were going. There's already a handful of potential policy initiatives that we're likely to dig into more. And then at the next meeting, it'll focus on some of the things that we'll talk about here today, crisis intervention training, and then start to build on that with a few other items for the following months, some of which we'll also touch on here today regarding county dispatch and mental health.
All right, thank you, Brian. Now we'll move on to Kristen, Community Education on Public Health and Safety.
Thank you. Like Sunshine, our work group has yet to meet this month. We will be meeting at CAP 1908 on Saturday, January 25th at 2 p.m.
All right, thank you. And last but not least, Veronica with the Economic Disparities and Service Accessibility Group.
So we met on January 6th, and it was a really good meeting. We had two presenters, Dr. Lisa Johnson from UIS, who presented on residential housing segregation. And then we have the Sangamon Mass Transit District with Steve Shuffle and Melissa Ashford. And we talk about several issues of transit accessibility, future transit developments, economic disparities and their impacts at the city level, CDBG grants and funding allocation, racial discrimination in housing and employment. And we have some issues to resolve that are related to the equitable distribution of city resources, transit accessibility in underserved areas, namely the east side of Springfield, the implementation of grant programs that encourage the economic development of impoverished neighborhoods, and housing discrimination and segregation. So those were the topics. We have outstanding issues, and we passed a motion to bring Dr. Lisa Johnson back to work on questions and resolving some of the issues that we didn't get to because it was a 2-hour meeting. We had very good, we had quorum and we had public comments, so it was a good meeting.
All right, it sounds like a good meeting. Thank you so much. Okay, now I will offer a few remarks and updates with the commission. Since we last met, There have been surprising turns in the case against Sean Grayson. He was scheduled for a trial call today that took place virtually, but we are still waiting to see if the Illinois Supreme Court will take up the case of whether or not Grayson should be granted pretrial release. We continue as a commission to stand with the Massey family and the state's attorney's office in efforts to keep Grayson detained, and we are happy to hear that the Supreme Court has taken some action. My second update tonight is regarding county board actions on resolutions sent by the Massey Commission. As you know, tonight's county board meeting is happening just across the street. It was not part of their regular schedule when we scheduled our meeting for tonight. However, as they gather tonight, some of our recommendations will take center stage. We acted to recommend that Sangamon County move forward with, first, the creation of a mental health board, and secondly, empowering voters to recall a Sangamon County sheriff. Both issues now await action by the board, Sangamon County Board. Regarding the mental health board, it appears that there is great support for this initiative, and conversations are beginning about the best time for organizing a ballot initiative for a high turnout election. Last week, the County Board Public Health Committee voted to approve the framework for the 708 Mental Health Board. The resolution includes the formation of a committee that will be allocated $50,000 to help perform a needs assessment that will guide the creation of the 708 board and ultimately serves to inform the voters what a small increase in property taxes will be used for. If approved by the full county board, the referendum will be put to voters on the March 2026 ballot. Regarding the recall resolution, our recommendation has faced real resistance. The measure was defeated by the majority of county board members in December. This was an important opportunity for the county to demonstrate that they are committed to recommendations of the commission and establishing new accountability measures for the office of sheriff. Members of the Massey family and Commissioner Calvin Christensen are there to monitor, speak, and report back. The Massey Commission is issuing the following statement for your information. The Massey Commission was established as a citizens commission in response to the tragic killing of Sonia Massey by a former Sangamon County deputy. This tragedy and response of the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office highlighted a significant concern. The citizens of Sangamon County currently lack a mechanism to hold the sheriff accountable mid-term. New accountability measures must be implemented for the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office to ensure responsible leadership and public safety for all. The commission believes it is in the best interest of the residents of Sangamon County for the county board to take action that enables a proposition granting recall authority for the office of the Sangamon County Sheriff. While we acknowledge that there will be legal challenges along the way, ultimately, it should be the people of Sangamon County that determine if that is an acceptable risk to ensure new accountability measures in Sangamon County. I'll reiterate the sentiment shared by Dr. Cruz in our last meeting. In order to build community trust, the county must be responsive to what the community is pleading for through the Massey Commission structure. If all goes as expected tonight, we will be sending them our third recommendation, one which is focused on hiring at the sheriff's office. Finally, I would like to acknowledge that we have received a response from the Illinois Attorney General's office regarding our request for independent investigations of sheriff's office. I will read the response in part. The Civil Rights Bureau of the Illinois Attorney General's office has received a copy of your complaint against Sangamon County Sheriff's Office. Thank you for taking the time to share with us the details of what you experienced. At this time, we are monitoring the issues described in the complaint for patterns and practices of discrimination or unlawful conduct and will contact you if our investigation moves forward. We're happy to see that our requests have been accepted and that the commission has been responded to both this request and the DOJ at this point. Now we will move on to tonight's educational.
Sorry,
Susan.
point of order. Just a question. I was under the impression that a quorum was half plus one. Is that the case for our commission?
Yes.
So 8,
Technically seven.
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 7 is our commission. So
So we're good.
we have a quorum.
Yep,
Okay,
we're
thank
good.
you.
Okay. Now we'll move on to tonight's educational presentations. Our first presentation will be a testimony from Keena Small. Tonight we have a family testimonial and some educational presentations focused on crisis response and mental health. To get us started tonight, we will have you turn your attention to the screen for a virtual presentation from Keena Small. She is going to share her family story and highlight the challenges, harm, and complexities of calling for help for a family member in crisis. Please welcome Keena Small.
Thank you. Can you hear me clearly? Okay. I appreciate the space to be able to speak concerning the issues that we had with my son, Greg, and I appreciate the opportunity to join with you in this endeavor. I find it very challenging. I have to be very honest with you, to recall what has taken place. It's been some time. And so I ask that you would bear with me as I go through sharing with you. And I'd also like to extend my condolences to all that have lost family members. Although Greg is still with us, we still go through a lot of challenges with him. And for me, having to go back over this situation, I watched my son being shot. So it's a little different for me. So in sharing this, it's like I'm reliving that episode that we had. So I first would like to share with you when I called the officers, the response that we received, I felt like it just was not the way that it should have been. And one of the reasons is because Greg had had many episodes before the one where he was shot. And the officers, we lived in Chatham at the time. As a matter of fact, all of our children pretty much grew up in Chatham. And the officers had dealt with Greg several times before this. So they were very familiar with his issues. And when I called this time, the officer that showed up at our home in Chatham at the time, he arrived alone. There was no backup, which was a real concern because I had called. The initial call was because Greg was initiating some self-harm and also was threatening to harm others, but he was in our home and in our yard. And because we didn't want it to escalate any farther, I called the police station and they were very familiar. I could never understand why the officer that showed up was um, alone, and also he was new and he was not familiar with any of Greg's history at all. When he arrived, he sat in his car for a while. I don't know if he was trying to make sure he was at the right place or what, but when he finally he got out of the car running. And I do know that so he didn't wait for backup, but he also, I believe it was him that made the call to um, the responders, the medical team to wait. And I could never understand why, because I know that previously with Greg, they always, sent the medical team along with the officers as well. So when he arrived, he he came out of the car running, and I was at the front door at the time, and my son was coming from the back, and he came to the front door, and I think he was trying to get in, but he wasn't in his right mind. I do know that. And he turned towards the officer, and I saw the officer with his gun, and I remember. Sorry. I remember screaming and asking the officer not to shoot him. He could have used a taser. I know they have their protocol, but I just felt like he could have used a taser. My son was trying to do self-harm with a steak knife, a very small one, as a matter of fact. Um, so we shot him 5 times, and then and one of the times he was on the ground. He was on the ground already, and Greg was shot in his back, his buttocks, his arm. He had just had multiple wounds. And when the medical team finally arrived, they, put him in the ambulance. And I think in that moment, I don't know if he recognized me because he yelled out, "Mom, help me!" And they, loaded him up and drove off. And then our home became a crime scene, where we were issued immediately out of our home to the police station. And what we had to deal with after the fact was, first we were issued out of our home, and we couldn't gather much of anything because it was at that point a crime scene. And they took Greg to the hospital, and while at the time he was not really coherent, they had him in ICU. A couple of the officers, they went in and charged him while he was in the hospital in the ICU unit. And I know that he was not coherent enough to understand what it was they were saying to him or asking of him. And the the trauma to our family and to Greg as well, because even to this day, he does not remember any of the episodes that he had previously before the one where he was shot. And those episodes were once he was he laid down on Route 4 and wanted to be ran over. And the police, they got him and took him to the hospital. Another episode, he was in Chatham and walking in the middle of traffic, and they got him. And they always responded. They knew him by name. They knew me. They knew us because we lived in Chatham, and I always came to his rescue or came to find out what needed to be done. He was assigned a team with SIU, with the mental health behavioral department, where they actually, before the shooting, they would come out and meet with him and talk with him, try to keep him on point with his meds because he lived at home with me. We did the same. So I couldn't understand why during this incident was everything so different, but I do believe it was because the officer that responded was not familiar with Greg. He came alone. He did not wait for backup, and there was no one else there. And when he got out of the car, I believe that in that moment, his decision um, probably caused him to be in a position where he didn't know how, or maybe was afraid, because Greg is, pretty tall, thin young guy. He's like 6'4". But I felt like it could have been handled so much better if they had sent someone that was familiar, because the call came from me. I stated my name, I stated what was happening. So I don't understand why they sent someone that was inexperienced and then came alone. And right now, my son is still in a care unit, and he's dealing with physical issues in his body, um, where he has to have doctor's care. He's got nerve issues, nerve damage, seeking disability, and he's just dealing with a lot. And although he is here alive, his life is nothing like what it would have been had it been handled, I think, differently, and he had gotten the care that he needed, from the mental standpoint as well, but certainly not being shot as many times as he would had been shot, because he did hit the ground and was still being shot. So that alone, and the trauma to our family, we've been in the community. I lived in, although I don't live there now, I lived in Springfield for over 35 years, the time that my husband and I was married before he passed away last year. And went through so much with being, I guess when you have something like that happen, people feel the need to take sides. And, it shouldn't be that way, but it is. And so all of the community that we had and had built up over the years, it became somewhat of a division where I think most people felt like they either needed to side with us or side with the police, and it just, that certainly wasn't the case. All we wanted was for Greg to be taken care of properly, of course, like any parent would, but also to make sure that the community was safe as well. And so I would like to see going forward more connection with, I mean, I don't even know. When I think about it, I would like to see more of a connection where the officers are able to respond um, in a more responsible way, because I certainly don't feel like that was responsible. I really felt like it was done totally out of order. But I just feel like even with the state's attorney's office, when the calls started coming into the state's attorney's office, a lot of Greg's medical information was given out to people by State's Attorney Dan Wright. And I feel like that was something that, I mean, that's personal information. It never should have been released to anyone that was calling in. And then the phone lines were cut off where people couldn't call in anymore. I don't know if that's the standard protocol, but I feel like everybody's voice should be heard. And if you're not able to, you should assign someone to that position where people are able to continually call in and want to give their support. But again, I am not familiar with that protocol. That was just a wish for me personally. But I do know that my son is still suffering, the family is still suffering, and although I don't live in Springfield anymore, um, it it's still a challenge coming back there and having to deal with issues with my son, because I deal with that. I'm his POA, so I still deal with it from long distance. But even coming back to Springfield, it's just certainly not the same. And I don't have the same relationship that I had with the officers before. I've always had a really good relationship with them, but I think that situation caused everything to change where, people just look at you differently when you speak out about something, especially if it's not in line with the way that they feel like things should be. And going forward, I would just like to see more, um, I don't know, I don't even know what the right words are. I would I just would like to see more of the officers being more responsible in their approach to people that have mental issues or those types of episodes, and that the community is just um, have a sense of knowing that the officers are there for us and not, or for the people that have those issues, and not just for um, whatever they feel like they're supposed to support. I don't know. If if there are any questions, I really don't have much else. It's really a challenge for me to even talk about it, because I haven't talked about it um, openly in a long time. So if there are any questions, probably now would be the time if you want to ask anything before I get off.
Any commissioners have any questions? If you get to the mic, you can hear it.
I am not able to hear you all.
Do any of the commissioners have any questions for Ms. Smalls? Susan?
Ms. Small, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, trusting us with it. I'm wondering if the Chatham Police Department has spoken with your family, acknowledged any changes in the process that they would make so that neither their officers nor your son would be in this kind of situation moving forward?
No, they have not spoken with us, and none to any other family members that I know of. I know that after the incident happened, I met with the chief concerning my concerns, and looking at the video, and because Greg was charged, he was charged, and the only way that they wanted him to plead guilty in order to get I guess I don't know what it's called, something with the mental issues, but no, they have not reached out to us at all, and I had such a good relationship prior to that. As a matter of fact, on one of the incidents that they handled, not this new policeman that Officer Hahn, not him, because I didn't know him, but there are several others that had dealt with Greg previously, and I had written in a letter and stated how, thanking them for their care initially. But yes, no, I haven't, none of us have really heard from them, and we don't, or at least I personally don't know how things are being handled at this point, and they have not disclosed anything. It's almost as if once that happened, for fear of being, I guess, the family coming after the police station. I don't know the right words to use for that, but perhaps they felt like maybe it was threatening to them. I don't know, but I feel like that relationship was lost after this last time when he was shot, and probably because he was shot. And, somebody had to, be accountable for that, whether it was the police, or my son. So it ended up being my son who was held responsible for his own actions. So no, they have not reached out since then.
I'm so sorry for that experience, and thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you. Thank you again for allowing me this space. I do appreciate it.
Any other questions, comments from any commissioners? Kristen?
I just want to thank you for sharing your story. I heard the multiple items and questions from you that I think that we can bring back to our work groups. And I just want to thank you again. It must have taken a lot of strength and be very wearing on you as a mother to have to relive this story. So I just want to share my empathy and thank you for your involvement and the work that you're doing to help us move forward.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate all of you. And with that, I am not going to be able to listen to too much more or, be involved, but so I will take my leave now, but I do want to say thank you once again for everything that you all are doing and for allowing me this space.
Thank you for joining us tonight, Ms. Small. The small family story is the right start for our next presentation. The next series of speakers will provide some education for us on the current state of crisis intervention strategies and co-responder programs in the area and throughout the state. Next, I'd like to welcome John Williams to the table. John Williams serves as the Crisis Intervention Team, acronym CIT, Regional Coordinator for Northern Illinois with the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board, ILETSB. John is joined by other ILETSB leaders that can help to answer some of our questions this evening. Jennifer Woolrich, you want to step up or you're going to stay there? Okay, that's fine. Cheryl Lynn Williams and John Kiger. Yes. With that, I will hand it over to John and his team. Oh yeah, and another person we have important joining us tonight is the Executive Director, Keith Calloway. Thank you. With that, I'll hand it over to John and your team, and the commissioners have your full bios in front of you tonight. Thank you very much, John. Yeah, absolutely. Or you could sit or stand, whatever's comfortable.
Thank you. I just drove down from Chicago, so I'd rather stand if that's okay with you. Stretch while I can. Good evening. My name is John Williams. I am the regional coordinator for Northern Illinois. I've been training CIT officers since we started that program in Illinois in 2003. So my 21st, 22nd year in doing that. My background is I have a master's in education and community counseling. I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor. My first gig out of grad school out of Loyola was police social services crisis worker, youth and family specialist. This is back when we had pagers. Some of you may not be familiar. Black box D-cell batteries would vibrate violently, and when something bad was going on, and I would get paged and go out and meet law enforcement at the scene of a mental health crisis or domestic violence crisis, homelessness situation, somebody overdosing on something and needing help. Also, runaway lockout youth, MRAI program, minors requiring authoritative intervention, and domestic violence. Um, uh, I got involved in CIT. I was recruited from a commander that I worked with. I knew him from when he was a little baby sergeant and went on a lot of calls. And when they started doing CIT through the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board, they asked me to do a child and adolescent section. I was director of youth services for Oak Park River Forest Townships at that time and ran a gang and drug task force as a civilian. So I had a lot of contact with law enforcement and with young people in trouble. So they recruited me in and that went well. And next thing I knew, I was working for Chicago Police Department and then all around the state. And a couple of years after that, they invited me to be a class coordinator. So what I'm here tonight to talk with you about, my understanding is a little bit about what CIT is and particularly about the 40-hour training that we do for law enforcement. There's a lot in it. I thought I'd try to do it in a way where you get a lot of information in a short amount of time. So I have a couple of slides. Many of them are pictures of the folks because it just, I think it sinks in a little bit easier than a lot of verbiage. So, okay. So this is the schedule that we have for the week, and as you can see, it's packed. I believe in this class we have 20 different instructors, evaluators, presenters, and actors. I broke it down to you for you by day in terms of what we do day by day, but instead of having you read all that, I thought I would just go through day by day with images. So on day one, we start off with going through orientation, a lot of paperwork, government work, right? Go through all that and do a little bit on the history of CIT, which sometimes is referred to as the Memphis model because it started in Memphis, Tennessee. After they had an incident similar to what your presenter remotely just discussed, where somebody who had frequent contacts with law enforcement and frequent contacts with the mental health situation, with the mental health community, and it ended up in violence. I think that what happened, the reason why CIT started was there was a recognition there was a failure in both systems. And instead of throwing things at each other and arguing about that, they decided to sit down and say, we need to do something different. Maybe the officers would have responded differently if they knew what was going on. And that's when they started training police officers in mental health crisis situations. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll start off with the next thing up here is we do a thing called the voices exercise. It's essentially an empathy building exercise where officers listen to an audio tape of what it's like for someone who has the symptom of auditory hallucinations or hearing voices that aren't there. While they're going and listening to that, we give them different exercises, things that they would know or should know in the state of Illinois in order to graduate from 8th grade in the Constitution test. And then creativity exercises, show them pictures and they have to write down what they think it looks like. It turns out to be far harder than people can anticipate when they hear disturbing sounds or voices in there. That goes about 20 minutes, and we have a debrief after that where we ask them, what that was like. One of them is they have to try to write out the words to a song that most people hear every time a sports program starts. And they find that it's incredibly difficult. So we talk about that, and as an empathy building exercise, say something that many officers have experience with is you pull somebody over because they rolled through a stop sign. What would somebody be behaving like if they were having these kind of symptoms? How hard would it be to try to communicate with somebody when you're being distracted in that way, and it catches their attention? After that, we roll into signs and symptoms. In this particular week, this woman here is Pat Doyle. She runs her own business now, Vision for Change. She's worked with NAMI, National Alliance on Mentally Ill, for a couple dozen years. And one of the other things that she does for us as a program is while she was working in some of those places, one of her jobs was training people who have lived experience, diagnosed mental illness, with telling their story in front of people they never met before. So they talk about their diagnosis, how they found out about their diagnosis, and good, bad, and ugly interactions that they've had with family, friends, colleagues, employers, and with law enforcement and the mental health system. and they share a lot of information in a very short time. Then they open up and say, does anybody have any questions? And the officers always have questions. And it's one of those things that really builds a lot of rapport between people. The officers themselves and anybody in this room, if the people came up and were speaking tonight, it would not be the first, second, or 15th thing that you would think, you go, I think they have mental illnesses. No way you would know that from their presentation. So I think it's a really amazing thing that they present that. Pat happens to share that she grew up in a household where her mom was suffering from mental illness for decades, and she did not know it. She did not find out until she was well into her 20s. And an interesting thing about the mental health system sometimes is what it doesn't do well. This woman was diagnosed and being treated for 20 years and did not know what her diagnosis was until her daughter told her and read it off a chart. So Pat shares that story, and that catches a lot of attention. We have several different presenters, rotate them through depending on their availability. This is Brandon over here. And Brandon is a young man who had a diagnosis of bipolar disorder and had a psychotic break one time when he was on his way trying to get out of a cult. He was so upset about the things that were associated with it, he started setting them on fire and then ran back in his house and set parts of the house in fire. House burned down. Nobody got hurt. Nobody got killed. But this is years later. This is his mom coming and sharing that story with the officers. And again, that really grabs people's attention in terms of empathy and having more of an understanding that mental illness is something that can happen to anybody. This is Henry. Henry works for NAMI now. He is a peer support counselor and also works in a thing called the living room. Does everyone know what that is? Okay, a living room is a kind of a stage between when somebody needs support, but it does not seem like they need to be hospitalized because they're not a danger to themselves. They're not a danger to somebody else. And you can't document that they're unable to take to care for themselves, but they're still in trouble. They need some help and support. So what happens is that it's staged, it's staffed up sometimes by volunteers, most time by a combination of staff and volunteers. And what they do is they go and they're not alone and people help them. Some of them, because of the way they're funded through their 708 board or other organizations, they will have a psychiatric nurse and medications on site for some things that help stabilize the situation, and people can stay there for a period of time. Some of them, people can stay there for days. Most times it's several hours, and sometimes that's enough for people to go and get and be able to feel their feet back under them and get back to their life. Henry's a vet. He's an Army veteran. He suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and alcoholism, and he is doing very well and has been for a number of years. He shares the stories about interaction with law enforcement. One of them was he was in fear for his life and running, and he was running and jumping off of rooftops of houses that were nearby, and then fell down, kept on running, and then ran into a house. The police were chasing him because somebody called in and said there's some guy running and jumping over things and falling and just broke into a house. So they went in after him. He went up to the top floor to try to evade them. As they were going up, he's decided he was going to escape by running and jumping out a window. Luckily for him, the way that the windows were designed was they come out this way. If they were hinged the other way, he would have went right out the window. He hit into him, bounced on the ground. Officers detained him, cuffed him up. And a thing that he shares with the class is that after he was all bundled up laying on the floor there, one of the officers came over, who was not involved in detaining him, came over and kicked him in the head. He said, and he shares with the class, he goes, I never understood what that was about. And I tell you, it gets deathly quiet in the room. I think people have beliefs about what that might have been about. And there are officers who had nothing to do with it, and this is decades ago, who go up and apologize that he had that experience and try to let him know that it's not like that with them, at least right now, which I think is a good thing. But it's one of those things that wakes people up. And I think that's what a lot of what this first day is about. And again, he's doing very well right now. This young lady here, she is a professional musician. She had a suicide attempt when she was a young lady in high school. She came out and went public in her community about it to talk about mental health, has become a mental health advocate, is still doing some of her profession, but now works again with NAMI and is running young people's programs. helping to make it easier and safer for them to talk about when they're having a hard time, to make it okay to seek out help, to make it okay to say that you're struggling and that you need assistance and to get that assistance. So these are just some of the folks on the first day. These are folks that are actors, professional actors that I'm trying to hook in to do work with us. And I'll tell you a little bit more about them in a minute when we get to that part. On day two, and then the rest of day one is we go through signs and symptoms of mental illness, general signs and symptoms, everything from depression, schizophrenia, obsessive compulsive disorder, mood disorders, anxiety disorders, et cetera, across the board. We have one speaker in the morning, share their personal story, and one in the afternoon. Day two, we cover typically three of the following. We always cover working with older adults. We keep changing the name of that. It used to be geriatric issues, but I think people didn't like being referred to as geriatric when they read that. So we changed the name to working with older adults and issues of aging, different things. But it's people who are typically like older than you are, right? As it comes down, and most people have that experience at some point. So we have somebody who's very well versed in Nick Greco, who goes and does a presentation on that, covers things, everything from Alzheimer's and dementia issues to elder abuse and all the different ways that that might manifest, and talk about what's normal kind of aging things and what are things that are things that people need to be concerned about and pay attention to. Every time we do that presentation, there's a handful of officers who have follow-up questions and then ask personal questions about things that they had concerns about for their mother or father or grandparents on that, so people get help that way. This is Allison on the end here. Allison covers co-occurring disorders, either on Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday, depending on the schedule. But Allison is a LPC, licensed professional counselor. She is now going for her doctorate. Co-occurring is when you have a mental health disorder and a substance abuse issue happening at the same time. And differential diagnosis can get kind of challenging because you don't know which symptom is from because somebody's on something or they're going through withdrawal or it's something else going on. It tends to be the case. This is a big overlap. There are people who are taking drugs or abusing alcohol because they're so uncomfortable with their mental health symptoms, and they do that for a while. Now they have a second problem. Now they're addicted to something. It's also the case that there are people who abuse drugs so hard and so long that it changes the way that their neurological system treats the world, and now they have another diagnosis. So all that on time. The bottom line is we try to keep people alive long enough to figure out what's going on, treat the symptoms. Like everybody here have kids, or if you haven't, you were a kid at some point. Getting a fever, you don't necessarily know what it's from, and it's scary as a parent when somebody has a fever because you don't know if it's a 24-hour thing or a hay fever or if it's spinal meningitis, right? It all starts out with the same symptom. So, but if you don't know what the illness is, the first thing you do is treat the symptoms. So we talk about that. Allison also shares with the class, she's somebody who has used Narcan personally in her life. So she knows something about addiction and about getting well and about staying well and what it takes to do that. So there's a lot of authority in that catches people's attention and again is very impactful on the officers. The other two is the bearded bald guys go in, and that's myself and Mark Benson is my colleague who covers Central and Southern Illinois in terms of coordinating classes. We're both LCPCs. We both have worked extensively with law enforcement in a number of systems. Mark's also worked in the prison system and has a private practice and does a lot of work with peer support. I cover the child and adolescent disorders section, and Mark covers medical conditions that mimic mental health disorders like urinary tract infections, diabetes, when somebody has their blood sugar drop. If you don't know what's going on, you think somebody is drunk or there's some other behavior going on. Mark also covers psychopharmacology, mostly because he can pronounce the 50-syllable words that they come up with for everything and all the other issues that come along with that. And that takes us through the day two. Day three, there's a shift. Day three, our presenters are typically always law enforcement officers who have a lot of experience with being a law enforcement officer and also with being a CIT officer. These are folks that we have worked with for a number of years. They know what they're talking about. They've had good, bad, and ugly situations where things have gone right by the book. There's other times when they did everything right and things went wrong. And there's other times where they tripped and stumbled and somehow came out smelling like a rose, because that's how things are when you're dealing with working with human beings. Things can shift very quickly. Um, this is Tony Regano. He's now a lieutenant with the Elgin Police Department. He's been there 20 years, and he helped build up their CIT program. Elgin is a department that has every one of their sworn officers, their non-sworn officers, their front desk staff. Everybody there is trained in CIT. They also now have 3 social workers who are full-time who work embedded with the department. They go out on calls with them when they're available. They also do follow-up, which is very important after calls, to go and make sure that people are getting what they need, so they're not going to be in crisis again. So he covers de-escalation, verbal de-escalation on about a 4-hour run in the morning. And then in the afternoon, we cover legal issues like how to do petitions, what mental health code is, those kind of things. And then also risk assessment. And two of the folks that we have doing that are Joe Carlson, who I made him look tall here because he's 6'7". He's also an LSW, and he was an officer who went through the class, contacted me after, was interested in this stuff. He's gone and gotten his master's in social work, is a recent LSW, and I had the honor of being mentoring him to be his clinical supervisor in his first placement. He's doing a lot of things with us, and actually presented this past August at CIT International on support groups for officers called Morning Coffee with Joe. And then on the end here is Rasul Freelane. He's a retired sergeant from the Oak Park Police Department. He's a certified educator, CIT officer, juvenile officer, a lot of great things in his track record. Was an SRO for a number of years, and is also about to publish a book on child to parent violence. So he is all in on this. And he hung out with me for about 2 years and then came in and was ready to start doing stuff with it. Tends to be the case that we mentor people in. They come in and they come and they volunteer and hang around the program until they get ready, till they feel like they have something to contribute, and then they lean in. Those are the 3 things that covered on Wednesday. And Wednesday is gearing the class up to be able to be successful in what is the challenging part of the week, and also is now for a number of years now, is the pass-fail for the class. When I first started in CIT, there used to be a written test. The problem with that is there were people who did well on the written test who were terrible with people, and there are people who are really good with people who freeze up on tests. So we found that it's more instructive for us to see how they do on role play. So Thursday, we'll start off, well, it depends. We'll either start off, depending on the size of the class, we'll either start off with 2 hours on a section like co-occurring disorders and then go into role play. Or in larger classes now with up to 45 officers or so, we'll split them into 2 groups. Half of them will go through classroom stuff, and the other half will go into what we call role play or scenario training. The people that we hire for scenario training are professional actors. These are people who are very good at what they do. They give a very realistic presentation on it. Some of them have their own individual or family history with mental illness, so it's very near and dear to them. They want to make sure this gets done right. The other folks involved in that is we have officers who are experienced CIT officers that we train to go in specifically on to evaluate this and give feedback. So what'll happen is officers will go in a team of 3. A primary officer who they're first on the scene, going to be addressing the individual in crisis. Secondary or backup officer who's there as a safety officer in that role, and also to be there in case the first officer hits it off wrong with the person, because sometimes people are like, I am done with you, I ain't talking to you anymore. And this happens in the real world. They shift out. Then we have a third officer in there as an observer, and we ask them to pay attention and note some things. And we'll ask them, was this done safely? And what did your colleagues do that you thought was effective? So they get feedback from the officers. They also get feedback from the professional evaluator. And importantly, they also get feedback from the actors who tell them important things like, you know what you were saying was really good, but the look on your face felt like you hated me and I didn't want to talk to you. That's very important information to get. And then officers are able to make those adjustments. If things go sideways, we'll stop the scenario, back it up. And one of the things about having professional actors, they can like rewind to right where they were and get right back in that moment again and bring it in. The other thing that we do is we videotape these scenarios while they're going on. And then the evaluators, after the class is done that day, they'll mark off times where we caught the officers doing well, where the techniques and tactics that are talked about in various sections all through the week that we've named and taught, they use them. And then on Friday morning, we show them best of things when they were using those things and doing well. And that turns out to really, it's good teaching technique where you talk about it, you do it, we talk about what you did, review it, coaching, go on from there in that. And that is an intense thing. The officers go through 3 role play scenarios in the course of the day. One is a primary, one is a secondary, and one is an observer. And it turns out to be a very effective thing. A couple of notes on that going in. For safety purposes, no one goes into role play armed. We do a physical pat down and 2 visual scans before they go in, so there are absolutely no weapons in role play. We have been known to put fake weapons that are blatantly fake looking weapons in the room, right, with that situation to add a level of difficulty to it. We'll typically go through 3 levels of complexity. First one is typically a suicidal subject by themselves and with symptoms of depression. We don't do scripted ones. We have the actors improv way through. They make up a whole history of the person in their head and they bring it, and it's very effective. Second one will be a little bit more complicated. Somebody is off their medications or their medications are not working and they're in a place where they're not supposed to be, so trespassing, or they're in a tenant dispute, or they're in a dispute with their boss at work and not leaving, and somebody calls the police, and there it goes. The third level, we typically will do something that's a domestic situation, whatever the combination of the actors are. It could be mother-daughter, father-son, spouses, boyfriend-girlfriend, boyfriend-boyfriend, whatever the situation is. The actors just make it up and go and roll it in there. And that's more complex because you have 2 people who are going, and both officers have to do something at the same time and be able to communicate each other and make sure of safety issues all through as we go through. And as you can see here, we do it in whatever settings that we have. We typically do these at police departments or at villages or other places where they provide us the space to do things. We've done them in parking lots. We've done them in this on the end here. I think I can't really see it well from here, but I think it's inshore at a shooting range where they allowed us to put a vehicle in there and do it as if it was a traffic stop. And that went in an interesting direction. Another one in an alley. This is at the Hines VA Hospital. And this was in a village storage room. So we go in a number of different situations on that. These, day 5, so we do a review. We take those videos, we show them to the officers, to the whole class, and say, why do you think we picked this video? What techniques are being used here? Could you do this in the real world? Has anyone done this stuff before? And what happens is the whole class is learning, everybody's chiming in, and they're naming things that some of them were doing, but they didn't know that that's what they were doing, but it was effective, so they kept doing it. What happens in this is everybody learns from each other. Our instructors are really good. I'm not going to lie to you. Our instructors are really good, but none of them know everything. And sometimes the best thing that happens in these classes is somebody who's sitting next to somebody else says something, and the person goes, I didn't know you knew that, right? And then they go and they see that technique is something that they can do in the real world. These are some of our actors. I want to say a couple of things about our actors. This is Ernest. Ernest works in a courthouse in addition to being a professional actor. This is Neil, who is a professional actor and blogger and does all kind of things with us and has a real passion for talking about suicide and suicide prevention because of family and friends situations. I can't really see here. This is Kathleen. Kathleen lost her brother a couple of years ago. He had a diagnosis of schizophrenia. And there are technical terms for what he died of in terms of his heart, but she's like, mental illness is what really killed him. And he had a hard life. So this is very close to her. And she speaks and then shares that story with officers and is very passionate about it. And again, it's a thing that wakes people up. These are some of our evaluating officers, Detective Michael Knighton from Cook County, Sam Rohde is with, used to be Orland. I forgot where she's from. And that's Russell Freelane, who was a retired sergeant I mentioned earlier. And this is Brian, who started with us about 2 years ago. You wouldn't know it from looking at him now. Brian was a biscuit away from weighing 300 pounds a couple of years back. His skin was yellow because he had jaundice, because he was an alcoholic and his liver was failing, and he had a choice to either get clean and sober or die. He made the right choice on that. And one of the things in his recovery that he found helpful was he took improv classes. He found out he was really good at it. And when he heard about this, he came up and interviewed with us, and he has been contributing to it and brings all that, and he shares all that. I'm not sharing anybody's private information. They share this stuff openly with everybody in the room. And it really grabs people's attention because what they see is you were like that, and then you got to this place and you're doing well. So the message in it, underlying it all the way through, is that therapy helps. Therapy can work. People can get well. People can go from the worst day of their life, and there are officers who see people on their worst day. And to know the another side of the story, that people can go from their worst day to going to being functioning and living and happy and productive and be able to be who they are in this world is a very important thing. And I think that comes across a lot more powerfully when people are sharing those things than from a slideshow. I say that as I'm showing you a slideshow, but uh, Day 5, we do that in the morning, and then the last two sections that we have typically are on autism spectrum disorder, developmental disabilities, and intellectual disabilities. The reason why we chunk those three things together is all the techniques that you would use are pretty much the same. Slow things down, work hard to figure out the best communication strategy that somebody may not be fully verbal, or they may take your words as a literal thing, so you have to slow down with that. Reduce stimulation, try to find out what their communication ability is, look and see if they have help, try to figure out what's going on and do it that way. The person who teaches that for me up here is retired Sergeant Steph Byes, who not only is an officer who's had calls with young people who have autism or other spectrum disorders or adults. He and his wife have two boys who are on the spectrum. And he shares an incident where he's got it on Ring camera where one of his boys decided to sneak out at night at 2 o'clock in the morning, and he had to call all of his friends to go and fight. It turns out to be a good ending, but there are tragically a number of those stories that do not end very well. There's something about young people with autism that really like water, and terrible things have happened. But it's very powerful for him to talk about that. You're not going to get a more powerful advocate, and he also has the combination of a law enforcement perspective and as a parent. And Joe Troiani is a representative who covers veterans issues, returning combat veterans and other veterans. And he's a veteran himself, 33 and a half years in the Navy, in Navy intelligence, retired as a commander. And he is also a doctor of psychology and teaches military psychology at the Adler Institute in Chicago. He also is an auxiliary police officer with Berwyn PD. He has been doing that for a number of years. So again, somebody who's well versed in all aspects of those things. Then we do a wrap up. We get evaluations, hand out pins, a little CIT pin that the state provides for us. One of the things that folks who are involved with NAMI and or with the mental health system on a regular basis know to look for and ask for a CIT officer. So that pin sometimes is a little bit of a comfort. When somebody goes from an anxiety level of a 7 to a 6 just from that pin, that's a little bit of a help in moving in the right direction on that. And there's some other pictures of our actors, and then some of the comments that I think are help. There's a lot of them. We get a lot of positive comments and send those off. Thought I would just name a couple of them here for you. Can easily use the information I learned this week professionally and personally. We get a lot of stuff where they are applying things, or it opens up their eyes to other things that they see in their own life or in the life of their family members or friends or other things. And then people making really nice comments about the impact that some of the presenters had on them, particularly folks sharing their stories, which I think is a big deal. I think that's all. That's the 40-hour. We also have an 8-hour introduction to CIT class for officers. We have a CIT concepts class, which is in the academy. So officers get 8 more hours in addition to the mental health training that they already had standardized in the academy. And we'll have an officer do that, a lot of communication skills, and then they'll do role plays. They'll demonstrate role plays because we don't have the time for all of them to go through, but they'll demonstrate role plays. And when you ask officers who are in training for volunteers, that means everybody volunteers. So they go up and they do, some of them will step up with the professional actor we have there and do some role play demonstrations in front of everybody. We also have several years ago initiated a CIT advanced refresher course that happened during COVID. It was initially a 2-day, but because of the sphere of exposure, they asked me to narrow it down to 1 day. So we found an excellent cheat. We call it a theater in the round. We'll have the actors in the middle of the room, and the officers are all sitting or standing around in a circle. We'll pick 2 of them and say, "You're it." They go in and they'll start engaging with the situation with all of their colleagues staring at them while they're doing it to make it maximum uncomfortable. And then as they go in and do it, we do it like an improv exercise. We'll pause and say, "Okay, now you 2 go in." And everybody has to pay attention. They all learn from each other because everybody has a an opening line or some way that they think they're going to build rapport with somebody. So if we have 30 officers in the class, you could literally see 30 different types of approaches to it. And some people take another tactic and put it in their pocket to go in. And the actors, again, give a real response. It's woe to the officer who goes into these situations um, only halfway bringing it or treating it like it's not a serious exercise. They get punished brutally by the actors because the actors take it seriously. They are in it. And again, another way that turns people around. Just some random pictures there. Oh, you know what? No, that's not it. Where are you? Here, I want to point this one of our actors, newer actors, Jackie, who's from the St. Louis area. Um, she like went down and hid behind a box and crawled in like this. Now, and the officers used body language, tone of voice, really soft tone of voice, and got her to feel safer and come out and sit. And she's, oh, I mean, I don't know how they do this, but they cry. Like, I mean, like real crying as they do this and go through. I want to tell you that when I first started working with law enforcement about 30 years ago, um, the tactics that I would see if somebody was hiding and they couldn't see their hands, they would go in and lift things up and throw the tables away and scare the hell out of the person. This is a long way from where that's gone. So I want to say is this training can work really well. Now, part of it is I think we do an excellent job of doing the training. The other part of it is what the officers bring to it. Some of that's their personal experience uh, and um, and dedication. And some of it is sometimes people have problems, and it could be a range of things on that. So it's the personnel as well as the training. I think we do a hell of a training, but that's my opinion, and I'm just stuck with that. So that's where I'm at. I'm trying to think if there's any other things we do. We also do a CIT advanced on juvenile and on veterans issues. Am I missing anything, Jennifer?
Say you.
Yeah, I said youth. I thought I said youth. We do an advanced youth course and an advanced veterans issues course. Oh, I thank you. We also do one for dispatch for 911. And a thing that has also changed over the years is we have had dispatchers come in for the whole week. We've had social workers come in for the whole week. One of them, I like how she's approaching the whole situation. And so now she's going to be teaching for me next week. And she's a police social service worker, what people call co-responders. And I think that's the thing we have to go. The T in CIT is team. And it's supposed to not just be law enforcement. It's supposed to be working with the community and connecting on that. And I see more of that happening. But it's people coming to work with law enforcement because the more that we talk about will co-responders go out and do this, I got to tell you, I got my master's degree. There was no training in any of this stuff. I don't know if it's changed now, but I'm pretty sure it has, based on what I see. And there are officers who are better at dealing with somebody in a crisis and helping them de-escalate than some of the social workers or psychiatrists that I've met. So it's an interesting mix. But I think having the flexibility to do all that, because um, forgive me, I forgot her name, the woman who presented remotely a little while ago. She noticed the difference when an officer who had rapport with them before they walked in the door. That's a whole different situation. You don't have to do that much work. You already have a relationship. And what we have to teach in the class sometimes is people have to try to build an instant relationship, an instant rapport. And some people are able to do that. They get the right angle, and it looks to people around them like they just Jedi mind tricked people, right? But it's really practiced skill set on that, and so all those things matter. All those things matter. I don't know if you have any questions or if you want me to shut up and get out of your way.
We'll open it up for questions from the commissioners. Any questions? We'll start with Sunshine. We'll make our way down.
Thank you. I apologize if you said this already, but can you tell me, for officers to qualify for the CIT training, I know it's not like mandatory for everybody as soon as they come in the door. Is it voluntary? Do they have to work there for a certain amount of years before they can take it? How do they get into this?
Okay, well, here in the great state of Illinois, the tradition was up until a couple of years ago, actually until this past year, that you had to be out of the academy and on the street for 2 years before you went in or you were eligible to be in a class. We have shifted that to 1 year because there's a supply and demand issue. We have, everyone remember COVID? It turns out that there were a lot more people not just hurt by that physically and economically, but also emotionally. Anxiety rates, depression rates, substance abuse rates went through the roof. I see it particularly with young people. The demand for reacting to people in crisis went up, and at the same time, we have less people to send people to. There's less beds. there's less counselors, and the ones who are, they're less experienced. Because some of the people who tapped out in my field were folks who were like, look, I've been doing this in person, looking at somebody across the room from me for 40 years. Now you're going to ask me to do Zoom? I'm out. So we lost some of the most experienced people in our field, which was not very helpful. So the demand went higher. So we had a lot of discussions about this and talking about it around the table with Let's and representatives, and decided that a compromise would be to go to a year because some of these officers are ending up dealing with complicated CIT calls on their first, second shift. The recommendation from CIT International, which is where we took it from in the first place, was officers need to be on the street and see some things. And then when you go and train them, they're like, that's what that was, right? But that's because of, for a number of reasons, short staffing in departments around. There are younger officers dealing with more complicated situations earlier. So we thought it'd be better to give them the training opportunity than to not. So it's also one of the reasons why we have it in the academy now, so it layers in a little bit faster. Did that answer your question?
That did answer. So when you say it's in the academy, there's like a abbreviated version of this that they're taking. Is that what you're saying?
Okay, in what I mean, I believe there's 7 academies and several part-time academies around the state, and it's a number of weeks that officers go through training there on all kinds of stuff. They added in an 8-hour portion just on CIT. They do get some things on mental health, but what we do is we get 8 hours on CIT that focuses on communication skills and reading body language, tone of voice, word choice, those kind of things. Do some interactive exercises, and then in the afternoon, have a professional actor come in and work with the instructor, who's one of our CIT evaluating officers, to go in and demonstrate those things in the real world. So that's what's been added in.
Okay. And when you say academy, you're meaning like when they first become an officer, the academy that they have to go through. Okay.
When people are going through training to become it, then they see it, and then they some of them get hungry for it right there and then, and are asking about it. And I like when that happens, because if somebody's hungry for this, usually it means that there's a potential that they can be really good at it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Brian.
Does Let's make any recommendations outside of the incident that the officer is seeing? Is the training focused on when the incident's happening, when they have something in front of them? Or is, for example, does Let's get involved with recommendations on how dispatch should handle a call on mental? And then the other part of it would be, and actually we heard a story tonight, what happens afterwards, the post-protocol, post-incident protocol. Did you guys get involved with any of those types of recommendations?
I don't think I'm the person to answer that
No
question, because I'm on the training aspect of it. I'm just looking over. If I don't believe there's a feedback loop specifically on that. And just to be clear, Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board, they set up the SPOs, the curriculum, and make sure that the people who are teaching the class, like myself or anybody that I think might be in, know, that there's a valid reason objectively to say that this is somebody who knows what they're talking about. They have good platform skills, and they're able to talk with officers about it. Because there's a what do you call it? Venn diagram overlaps. There's people who know how to do what they do. Then there's people who can talk about what they do. And then there's people who can, train police officers. And it gets down to a narrow area really quick. Because I don't know if you've noticed this, sometimes people have strong opinions about law enforcement. And they might be good at training other social workers, but they're not good at training officers when it comes down to it.
You had mentioned that one of the things you've seen that have changed the last 2 decades, role plays, have replaced written test was one example.
Yes.
Is there anything else that stands out to you that's changed?
Let me narrow it down. We used to do 3 hours on a specific technique on dealing with an issue that was called excited delirium. Excited delirium doesn't exist as a category anymore. They call it hyperactive delirium. It's the exact same symptoms, but they have a different name. ER doctors said that law enforcement should not be diagnosing that. Basically, what it is you're usually it's from extended drug use of stimulants, and somebody's metabolism goes to the races. The calls come in. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say this other than to say it. The calls typically come into dispatch as naked, sweaty person running around and breaking things and not feeling any pain. And we're trying to get a protocol recommended to it now. We used to do a protocol where it took 5 officers who had to be well trained and know how to work together to be able to get the person on a stretcher, and also be able to, one of the recommendations was to initiate ketamine. You had to get the right level of that. That is not, we don't do that anymore. We don't teach it. a gap area is that there is nobody telling us what officers should be doing when somebody is running around in that state. It's like, well, get them to the hospital, but well, how do you get somebody to the hospital safely in that kind of a situation? Because communication tends not to be an available option. So it's difficult. It's not the only challenge like that, but that's one. We have gone from limiting the classes to 30 to I've done ones as large as 60 officers at a time. It's more expensive as a class, but it's better bang for the buck per officer. And we went from having 2 scenarios for pairs of 2 to 3 scenarios for teams of 3. Again, we show videos, but it's different when you're in the room and somebody all of a sudden sinks the hook in and somebody like changes their demeanor, and you gain compliance verbally from talking with somebody, and that goes successful. You can feel the change in the room when you're in the room. That our we have decent equipment, but we're not cinematographers doing this stuff, and there's no mood music to tell you how to feel. But when you're in the room, you can feel it. And so the officers pick up things from each other that way too, and I think that's been a pretty good one. One of the other things right off the bat, when I first started as a coordinator, I moved. We used to have family members come in and talk to the class on Thursdays, while people were going in and out to to the scenario training, going in and out, leaving the room. It felt very disrespectful to me. I didn't like it. So they gave me permission. We started doing it right out of the gate on the first day, and it's been much more effective because this is who we're talking about. People who are living with mental illness. We want to put that right out in front so they know this is a real thing. This is who we're talking about, and these are folks who might have a bad day and going to need your help. We review the curriculum every year, and I want to say we have a nice little discussion or review, but we have long, protracted arguments about what we want to keep in and what get out. We go over all the evaluations from the officers during the course of the year who said, I like this, but I want to know more about this. This is too much. Some stuff is not redundant. It's not redundant in my view. It's layered. What depression might look like for a senior citizen might look different than somebody in their 40s, might look different from somebody in their 20s, and definitely looks different for somebody who's 8 years old or 17 years old. A lot of the mistakes I see with young people who are suffering from depression is they get diagnosed as being an angry jerk. Because sometimes when people are hurting, they act like porcupines and skunks. So we got to get around that. So there's a number of things within there that we do. I'm trying to think if there's any other major one. I think at this point, mostly it's tweaking.
Think now that CIT International said it's okay to have about 10% of the class can be law enforcement, so we allow others who work with law enforcement to attend as well.
Things we partnered up with. We've now done 2 trainings for the Veterans Administration Police. We've done one at Hines. We're doing one at we've done it at Jesse Brown. We have another one coming up at Hines in this cycle. We've gotten calls from NCIS and other folks because they're dealing with these things, and they like our training because they're officers who have gone to it, get a lot out of it, and so we're helping develop them there. We're also working on co-responder training. We've gotten requests from different organizations in the state of Illinois.
Help folks, they all attended our training.
And more and more social workers. We've had hospital staff, hospital security, some administrators sometimes, which is really helpful because they sometimes don't know what's going on right outside their doors because of meetings and other stuff they're in. So it's helpful. I think more people are getting that it's helpful to know something about what's going on and also to work together. Also, paramedics. We've had a number of paramedics come through, and they don't get this training, which is interesting because sometimes legislation comes in and says, well, paramedics are going to do this, and the paramedics are like, nobody told us that. And so it's important to have people on the same page and work, again, as a team, right, to be on the same page when they're going in those situations.
Yep, that was great. One just follow up. Most everything that you said had changed was positive, but one thing that I caught at the beginning, and I probably as a disclosure, so part of my practice is in lobbying, part of it involves physicians. One of the first things you said sounded like it's a limitation that you haven't been able to do things that you used to be able to do because of what sounded like a scope of practice dispute. So it sounded like you said with excited deliria, it was more than just the definition changing. It was you maybe no longer can start to you can no longer train and recommend things because somebody said that's not for you guys to do.
It's not in your purview. Yeah.
Okay.
So the recommendation, unless somebody has heard something different in the last 24 hours, the last thing I saw was like, well, you should get them to the hospital. Nothing about a safe protocol to get that done. Because when somebody is in that state, if you end up wrestling with them and their heart rate is already up 160, 170, and they're using drugs, that's close to getting to a major stress on the body, right? So I don't, nobody's told me something that works. There's always somebody who wants to sell something, right? But I don't know. That's the thing that we wrestle with. Oh, I'm not stepping out of my range here. Okay.
No, I appreciate it.
Hi, thanks for being here.
Hi, thank you.
And this is just for the rest of the commissioners. I have a comment. I really don't have questions for you. I had 2 or 3, but they were all answered. I had CIT training, the first group in Illinois in 2003. I'm retired from city of Springfield here, retired as a sergeant, was coordinator for the program when I retired in 2019. I appreciate what you do and all of you back here, what you guys are doing. It's was one of the most impactful trainings I had ever gone through, especially meeting with, and we referred to them as consumers then, I think initially, but people with mental health issues that I had actually dealt with rather out on the street. There were 3 of them in the class that were presenters, and it was like a wow moment. I mean, it really is a fantastic program, but I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate that you had that experience because it is. People can get better, and nothing like knowing that from seeing it.
So, do you guys incorporate scenarios where you have sign language or other languages besides English spoken?
I don't recall that we've had an actor that knows sign language and does that. We have had things where people will not verbally communicate. We've had ones where people make up. We actually have one as a husband and wife team that they have this whole scenario. They make up their own language, and they're going and trying to communicate. Most of it is trying to figure out body language wise what is going on, and it's interesting. It's a real challenge for officers. Those scenarios take long.
Yeah.
And with
So there's the issue of cultural competencies attached to languages, right? So do you also have that as a component of the curriculum?
Well, I'm not aware that we have specifically had sign language as a scenario. Again, we have 3
No,
scenarios.
I mean cultural competencies attached to the languages, right?
Any language.
Any language, right?
Attached to any language. Hmm. I think it depends on the culture of the actors that we have at the time. Some of them have gone back and forth between when they speak 2 languages or bicultural. Am I saying that the right way? Like they'll skip back and forth to it or make different references. But not again. We don't design them as a script. We do them as scenarios on that. But that's interesting.
And does this training have a component or comes after or is accompanied by an implicit bias training, right? Or anti-racism training?
Officers get that in other places. The way that it's counted in ours is from what I was saying. It was the experiential piece of interacting with different people who are because the focus is on mental health, and it can pop up in a lot of different ways. But like I said, I think most of it comes in from the interactions with officers. We are not specifically teaching sections in what I think you're in the manner that I think you would usually see in a again another thing that it's changed. I'm trying to remember, I think it was called cultural competence, but they also had I mean they were teaching these things in elementary school 30 years ago, right, with different curriculums. They changed the names of the curriculums, but really it comes down to treat people well. And don't be a jerk. But it gets kind of
And
complicated.
yet
But I'm
we
not
have
aware that
biases, right, with the police that we don't treat certain people well, right? So
Hang on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's honestly a separate class. Scope for competency, implicit bias, procedural justice is done separately. This class is physically 40 hours for mental health issues and dealing with CIT, but all that is taught in the academy, also in in-service. Code of conduct is a state mandate is required. and so is PJ, and so those are all taught in separate classes. We don't want to dilute those topics, trying to rush those through. Make sure we do a good job what we're just one time we're doing right now.
And yet, I will think that because we are intersectional, you know, I can tell you that you could have a person of color suffering from mental health crisis that also doesn't speak the language or that experiences other things that are culturally unknown to you, right? So the fact that it's CIT doesn't mean it's not going to be intersectional. And that's what I'm trying to point out.
It's a 4 year block right now. We really want to get to the gist of mental health, so we could cover those other things, and you're correct, they can't intersect you with somebody with a different language, different culture within a mental health setting. But we really want to focus in on a 4 year block with this mental health training. It's such a large block already, and there's so many different avenues with mental health. If you're dealing with veterans, you're dealing with youth, you're dealing with kids with autism. So you're 100% right. But it's a full week block right now. We're trying to incorporate other things in other trainings, so we
Right.
can give each training the time that it deserves.
Yes, I'm just trying to point out that the fact that you have a person
We
with a mental health crisis
understand.
requires you to look at the whole person
Agree.
and their identities and
Agree.
intersectionality. So it's not separate from any other training. It's actually joined. It's actually
It's
a
kind of
representation
layered,
of all
right.
the other trainings in a person that is experiencing a mental health crisis, right? So it's not like you
Yeah.
have to separate curriculums. It's all one. If you
Agree.
look at the individual as an intersectional with multiple identities, that's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, and I'm going to say,
Yeah.
one, we're caught in the web of time, right? We have a limited amount of time to be able to do things and staffing and all that kind of stuff. I worked in Oak Park, Illinois for 25 years. There was a year when we were doing our stats, working with kids involved with gangs, drugs, and violence. There were 38 different ways that kids identified. And the focus needs to be in a practical sense for the class to be on communication, and then also to realize the limits of your communication. If you're not good at that, if you're not able to communicate with somebody, you need to call for help and get somebody else out there. And sometimes, I mean, I'm not a fan of these things because I think they're ruining the world, but sometimes these things are useful in terms of a translator. Um, I had a case back when I was doing crisis work where there's a gentleman who got picked up by law enforcement. He was walking along, he had a machete in his jacket and a screwdriver, and he was mumbling and they didn't know what he was saying. And they said, "We think he's mentally ill." And it turns out he had dementia and went out to his garage and then forgot where he was realized he was in a dangerous neighborhood on the west side, so armed himself up and started wandering around to find his own place and ended up wandering from the west side into Oak Park. I went in and the gentleman said something and I went, "Sprechen de Deutsch," and it turns out, and I go, "Polski?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, find somebody who has SKI at the end of his name on shift and get him over here." And he came over, and sure enough, there was somebody who, his grandparents spoke it enough that he was able to have that conversation. So I think those are very specific kind of situations. I'm not going to argue, and I don't feel defensive about your point. This class could be 400 hours easily, right? And my rating on it, we cheat to get all the stuff in. There's about 72 hours of information in here on a practical level that some people go through master's programs have never experienced, right? But these officers have it, which is why we like the team approach. There's somebody in there with 20 years experience who knows a lot more than somebody with 1 year, but then there's somebody else who's been doing it for 2 years who had an experience that's unique to everybody in the room. When they share that, everybody learns it, right? So we do the best we can. We've had an interesting range of folks be our actors, but we can't cover all of those things in any one class for sure with the time that we have. But officers have been pretty good at finding resources and following up when they realize that communication, when it goes effectively, means that they go on what they call hands-on less often. That's less opportunity for them to get hurt or anybody else to get hurt or sued or anything terrible happen when those things go well. I wish it worked 100% of the time. I haven't found something that works 100% of the time. If any of you come across one or are aware of it, please don't sit on that.
Good evening. Thank you for the information. Thank you for your storytelling. Thank you for the photographs. It helps the stories stay in my head. I have several questions. I wonder how many of the law enforcement officers in Sangamon County you've trained?
Oh, I don't have that number off the top of my head for sure.
Are there departments in Sangamon County that have sent officers to you?
Did you say zoo? Oh, no, I think I ran the numbers today. I want to say there's 539, I believe, have gone through in Sangamon County.
I'm sorry, 539 officers in Sangamon County have done CIET training?
I believe so.
How many officers do we have? No. In Sangamon County, how many officers do we have?
And I think that's where these things come in handy to.
A lot of smaller agencies.
I know we have small agencies. I also know we have many layers of law enforcement with the state capitol here, but that's a really big number. And I'm quite frankly shocked by it. I'm going to write that one down. And that's over the last 20 years, or is that more recently? It looks like maybe she's looking it up. Okay.
I think that's stuff that they can find out, verify, and get back to you if they.
That's fine.
Good to know. So.
Yeah. So I have a series of questions that I'd like to ask about. I think the content here is really vital. I think it's really important, and as you alluded to, I think it's important across many disciplines. Does any of the 40 hours that you do attend to law enforcement officers recognizing that maybe they have their own mental illness for which they need treatment?
Yeah, we have wound in wellness for officers for 22 years. We got explicit permission to do so later on because it comes up. I will contact Jennifer and let her know that we had officers that had depression, that had suicidal tendencies. We had to do things to get them help.
Right.
And we stick with them and follow up. My colleague Mark and I, we get phone calls like that on a regular basis, or I guess to say an irregular basis, but it's fairly common. During COVID, there was a time period where I was doing about 2 suicidal interventions a month.
Thank you. I think I heard you reference that there are instances when first responders are also training with you?
Mm-hmm.
Have any first responders from Sangamon County trained with you?
I'm north of 80, so I couldn't really speak to that very clearly.
Is that her name? Who? She just started.
Nancy Finley.
I don't know if you're aware that there was an incident with 2 first responders who killed a patient by strapping him face down on a gurney 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
In the midst of a mental health crisis.
I'm not a medic, but I don't understand that tactic. So
I think it had everything to do with meanness. I said it. Yes, thank you. Earl Moore was the man who was killed by the ambulance staff. As part of your training in crisis intervention, and I'm going to stretch what may be the definition of crisis intervention. I understand that this training is specifically related to mental illness, but does any of your crisis intervention training help officers know what to do when another officer is creating the crisis?
Oh, you're talking about stepping in to keep somebody else from doing something stupid.
Stupid, harmful, hateful, lethal. Yes.
The officers on Wednesday, I talk about there's a lot of real talk sections within there, and Tony Regano, Lieutenant Regano, does a really fantastic job of talking about the importance of maturity. And the thing that you can't control another human being. The only thing you control is what your reaction is going to be. And it has to be from a place of professionalism and maturity, legal and justifiable in every way, shape, and form, and also kind. Mm-hmm. He layers that in real thickly, and there's some interesting conversations that happen in those situations.
Mm-hmm. So for us, for instance, in this community, one part of the conversation was how Sean Grayson's partner responded when Grayson murdered Sonia Massey. A partner is in a multi-layered crisis situation that his partner, the law enforcement officer, instigated, created, amplified, exaggerated. So I'm wondering if your training helps officers know what to do when another officer is creating the crisis. I'm sorry, you don't want him to comment because of the litigation against Sean Grayson?
Want to put set in training as a whole, and I won't talk about anything in particular right now.
So
I'm
just
not
remove the
asking.
name and make it a general
Okay,
question.
so yeah, my question is, I was just giving an example. So yeah, my question remains, is there a part of this training that addresses how officers should respond when another officer is creating the crisis?
I'm trying to answer the question honestly and also within the boundaries, right? So can I give another example that didn't happen here?
Yes.
Everyone's familiar with George Floyd? Everyone is familiar with the image of that officer when he's kneeling on his neck?
Mhm.
Sorry, is this good? So everyone knows it's a terrible image. When that happened, that was a full-blown discussion that came up in class because there were officers who go, I've seen that look before. I've seen it when people are too far off the edge. And this is where you find out if you have really good people on your shift or not. Because somebody shared that they started getting that look on their face and their partner came and tapped them out. Now, I can't say that we teach part of a curriculum on that. I can tell you that these are discussions that come up on a regular basis, and the officers have a real talk with each other about those moments. I can't make up stuff, right? But that's what it is. Am I still coloring in the lines or am I in trouble? Okay, just checking. I don't, it's responsive, but I don't know if it fully answers your question or gets to what you want to. I think it's an interesting thing, but I think that use of force training is something that officers get a lot of training on.
Can you use the mic?
Give him that one.
I don't want to get off topic, but yes, officers are required to have training in duty to intervene, and also de-escalate. You know, so that's a different conversation for a different day, I think.
Well, as commissioners, we get to ask whatever we want.
A-
You don't
and
have to answer it, but we get to ask.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And again, not trying to, I'm walking a tightrope here with our team. We want to be responsive and be part of the solution, but also we have to be sure that we don't do anything that can jeopardize anything going forward.
So I understand that. And I understand too, we exist because an officer created a crisis that resulted in someone's murder. So we have to ask these questions, even if you are not the person to answer them.
We're not debating any of that. We're here to support you. We are.
Okay.
But I just don't want to say anything in the future that can be that we regret in the future. That's all I want to do.
A coin just dropped for me. Again, in the verbal de-escalation section, there is a section where they talk about officer-initiated jeopardy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pardon? Part of a 4-hour section. So they're, like I say, it depends on the class. Some do deep dives. It depends on the conversation in the room, but I've seen it go pretty deep. Yeah.
Yeah, I have one more. And it picks up on what Veronica was asking about in terms of cultural competency training and implicit bias. You seem to be a person who appreciates feedback. So reflecting on the images you showed, the overwhelming percent of your trainers are white. So again, we exist because we are addressing systemic racism, not only in law enforcement, but in all aspects of our community. And so I am aware that there is an imbalance in the images that you've shown of who your trainers are relative to how law enforcement interacts with folks, especially given the disparities around care that's available. You mentioned the shortage of counselors. The shortage of counselors of color is even steeper. The amount of resources available are disparate. I'm not saying anything you don't know, but so I want to give you that feedback that it looks like your presenters are disproportionately white.
And I'll just say to you, it's far from where it was 20 years ago. One of the things that is difficult sometimes is I'm recruiting. We're auditioning 6 more actors Wednesday this week, and again, there are folks who like want nothing to do with law enforcement, and it makes it challenging on them. So we have it as a priority, and I do my best to put in. And this is not everybody. There's like dozens of more trainers, but I don't want to present a false presentation to you. There is representation. Is it robust as it could be? Those are individual choices that people are going to make. We can't make somebody work with us and do that. But we put out a lot of invitations, and it keeps getting better. I wish it was where I would like it to be, but we're moving in the right direction. We just got to keep going.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Just an observation and then a question
Mhm.
that will probably take longer to answer than we have. The observation is I do admire the evolution that you of this program that you've been discussing all evening. I admire it that you get folks from the professions to talk to folks in the professions. And I'll leave that at that. My question, excuse me, my question is one of program evaluation.
Mhm.
How do you go about doing that, or do you do it? I don't mean teacher evaluation. I don't mean evaluating students. I mean, is the program working?
Mhm.
And how do you know that?
Okay. Well, I see you. I'm trying to answer this. I'm self-editing to try to make it shorter.
Just make it short. Just, it's cool. I want to
Okay.
hear it though.
So CIT International, they do they've sponsored research, and there's been different research. One of them's from Chicago, who's done deep dives on is this effective or is there not? And there's a bunch of studies going on there. To the degree that I know this works, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think it worked. The cues for me are is I get calls from officers a week, a month, a year, 2 years, 5 years later going, you know what, this stuff works. And I say, you got a story, and they tell me a story. It's not uncommon. We'd have somebody come up on the first day and say, you know what, this is all, this is cool and everything. God bless you. You seem like a cool guy. I like your beard, but I'm a tactical officer. This is not my thing. And I said, just stay in the class and let me know how it goes during the course of the week. They're usually apologizing by Wednesday. They're like, there's a couple of good things in this. And after role play, they come up and they're like, you know anybody who's quit smoking in your life?
I never have, but okay.
I'm not talking about you, Si, but you know people, right?
Yeah.
When they quit smoking and then all of a sudden they want everybody else to quit.
Yeah.
That happens a lot with this. And
Okay.
that to me tells us that we're doing something on the right page,
and-
and we have people who are doing more with it.
And I hear you.
Yeah.
In the business, that's called anecdotal. You
Yep.
mentioned that CIT is doing program evaluation.
I said we do. I said the evaluation is the evaluations are from all the officers in the class, right? They give a detailed evaluation on that, and then there's a layer of what you were mentioning before, where myself, Mark, other subject matter experts go and observe people and make sure that they're doing the SBOs and hitting all of the curriculum correct.
But there is no systematic formal evaluation of outcomes. That's what I'm asking.
Getting to outcomes, I would say this again, anecdotal, but I think a good indicator, right? There are departments, the more CIT officers that they've had, their sick days have gone down and their use of force has decreased. I think that's a pretty good indicator, but I don't know who's going to pay for the study to do that on a wide base across the state.
I'll make one more observation there.
Sure.
I think that to the extent you can show communities communities generally, that there's an effort to get this kind of thing through in training officers and responders and whomever. So I'd suggest that you find the money to do a formal evaluation of it. But thank you for the presentation.
Sure. Thank you.
I have one more question. So,
Close.
wanted to know what are the key elements of the crisis intervention training that you believe have the most significant impact on officer behavior during a mental health crisis?
I don't want to go bumper sticker, but get there fast and slow things down. Some of the things that people pay attention to, and it sounds bizarre, but they'll say, talk to somebody like you're talking to a human being. Don't get stuck in work mode. Talk to somebody. Some of the most effective things when we're watching videotapes, the ones where officers are the most effective, it sounds like two people are just having a conversation. And you can see the body language, the tension, everything go, and it seems like two friends are having a conversation. So I think those are the elements. We talk about body language, tone of voice, word choice, and the body language and tone of voice matter a lot in that situation, and that they need to sometimes mirror and loan somebody else their calm center when they're really in an agitated state, and let them move around. As long as it's safe, right? As long as nobody's going to get hurt, let them move around, calm themselves down, walk way through it, and just be in the room with them. We teach breathing exercises, right? To go and slow down your heart rate because you're smarter. Well, you're not smarter, but you have more of your brain accessible when your heart rate's under 158 beats per minute or so. And they know that from a tactical standpoint because they get the peripheral vision goes, you get auditory exclusion, all kinds of other stuff. But that also happens when people are in crisis. Um, but really, I'd say if I had to do it, slow things, get there fast, slow things down. And I preach, act like this is the most important person in the world for you right now, and you have all the time in the world. And you don't have 6 other calls that you have to respond to. Just act like this is the only thing you have to deal with right now. And your job is to keep that person alive to the next sunrise. Ironically, or I don't know if ironically is the right word. Paradoxically, when you behave as if you have all the time in the world, you actually build rapport faster. And when you build rapport, you're able to get compliance or get somebody to help make a plan with them instead of telling them what they're going to do or we're going to the hospital. It starts out like that. It does usually escalate. Is that?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Sure.
This is not a question. I just need you to repeat something. You said, in response to Commissioner Susan, that there is something in the training, that addresses an officer dealing with another officer who has caused harm. I don't remember what you called it. There was something in the training. What was the name?
But just to be clear, it doesn't specifically talk in the curriculum about another officer. It talks about each officer being mature and what that means, and not doing a thing that's referred to as officer-initiated jeopardy. Now, there's a range on that. There's some people that think if somebody shows up in a uniform, that everything is going to go uphill. That has not been my experience, right? But words matter, body language matters, tone of voice matters. All those things are readable, and because they wear so much gear, a lot of it is read from the neck up, the look on their face.
Thank you.
Those are things that get talked about, but it's more maturity of officers, and you got to control your own responses. The deep dive on that.
I do have one more. How often do officers go through this training? Is it a renewal or is it just once?
So they'll go through the 40-hour course, and then within a couple of years, they're able to attend an advanced refresher course.
Okay, and how long is that?
That's an 8-hour day, and it's intense. We order in lunch because they have to stay during lunch because we keep on talking about stuff and push hard.
Okay.
Again, it started out because of a COVID protocol, but it worked so effective in terms of the feedback from the officers because they all learn from each other. So instead of getting a couple of experts in PowerPoints, they get 30 people interacting with each other as well as with the actors.
Anything else from commissioners? Okay, very robust conversation. I do have one question for Iletsby. Is CIT training mandated in the state of Illinois?
For improved training, 40 hours.
Okay, so in the training academy, okay. But once you're out on in the field, no.
It's a volunteer specialty force.
So every officer doesn't get it.
No,
Okay.
and that's part of Memphis model as well. Thought process is, if we make you take it, you won't do a good job in class yourself.
Right.
People who want to train.
Okay. All right, so just for clarification, mandatory in the training academy, available to officers who seek it, okay, but not widespread,
It's not mandatory.
not mandatory. What? Okay, okay, all right. Okay, thank you so much. Now we're going to move on to our next presenter. Our next presenter will be Chris Mueller, the Executive Director of Sangamon County 911/ETSD, Sangamon County Central Dispatch System. Mr. Mueller, come on up. You can either take a seat at the table if you like, or the podium. Okay, all right. So, Mr. Chris Mueller, thank you.
Welcome to the boring part of the presentation. Anything near as exciting as they did. So, anyway, my name is Chris Mueller. I'm the executive director of Sangamon County 911. I've been there for about 7.5 years. We dispatch for about 45 agencies. We do all police, fire, and EMS in the county. Our shop is broken up into 3 sections. We have city dispatchers, city PD dispatchers who are dedicated just to city PD. We have county dispatchers who are dedicated to the sheriff's office and all of the rural police departments in the county. We have every small town except for Chatham. Ironically, we do not dispatch for Chatham PD, but that's the only one. And then we don't dispatch for the state entities, universities, things like that. We don't have direct dispatch for them. And then we have all the fire agencies. We do have 100% of all the fire agencies. It's a Springfield Fire and all the rural fire, volunteer fire departments as well. So, which is 16 of them. We have a rescue squad also that we dispatch for, 3 ambulance companies, and 25, I guess, law enforcement agencies. Calls. Our population in Sangamon County is just under 200,000. I think it's at 198. Maybe it's less with the 2000 census. I'm not exactly sure. But 911 calls we handle in 2023. I didn't pull 2024's numbers yet. But we had 127,366 911 calls. So if you think about that, that's 2/3 of the population, of Sangamon County's population. That's a call for, 2/3 of our population, basically. In addition to that, which is kind of astounding, is our admin line calls, which we can get some emergencies through admin lines. But generally, these are people calling for other issues and things they don't think are emergencies, because we try to train people not to use 911 unless it's an emergency. And unfortunately, the word emergency is different in everybody's own mind. What's emergent? So you've heard the jokes about people on Thanksgiving calling about turkeys, and how to cook their turkey. That's an emergency for them on that particular day. So anyway, admin line calls, in addition to the 127 911 calls in 23, we took 381,000 admin line calls. So the phone's always ringing at dispatch. Our manpower, we have 9 people on at any given time in a dispatch center to handle these calls. And one of those is a supervisor. So we have 3 dedicated to Springfield Police Department, 2 dedicated to the county and rural sheriff's office and rural fire. And then we have 3 dedicated to fire and EMS for 2 shifts of the day. And then we drop to 2 dispatchers for fire and EMS at night. Although that's kind of a misnomer, because when the phone rings, anybody can pick it up. They're all trained call takers. So if it's a fire call, you're not going to get transferred to fire dispatcher. If it's a police call, you're not going to get transferred to a police dispatcher. They're all trained in the initial call taking. When a call is made to 911, what people don't understand, and the frustration of a lot of callers, is that while a dispatcher is trying to ascertain information, we're already dispatching help to the scene. So they type things, they create a ticket, they're typing information in, but that ticket electronically is already in another person's computer system. So police, fire, EMS are sent at the same time the dispatcher is talking. But you know what often happens is the caller gets upset with us, gets aggravated because they think we're not sending help because we're too busy asking questions, and they don't care about answering the questions. They just want to get help there as fast as they can. We're sending it, but we need more. We always like to get more information so that we can send the appropriate help. This is not mine. Send the appropriate help to the scene, and manage our resources. We don't need to send police, fire, and EMS to every single call and waste some of those resources. So part of our job is resource management as well. Programs we have that are kind of pertinent to this forum, I guess, are the premise alert program. That's actually by statute in the state of Illinois is a premise alert program that we abide by, and it's way underutilized. This is something where family people in crisis themselves with whatever issue, I guess, they can self-report and have it on file by address. So we can have that information pop up as an alert that, hey, somebody at this house has an oxygen tank. Somebody at this house has a mental health issue, or whatever the case may be. Anything they want us to know, we can put on alert, and when their address pops up. Now, the limitations to that is it's by address, of course. So if they're at the mall or at a restaurant having an episode, it's not going to help for that, but it will help with the address. To go along with that and kind of piggyback, it's kind of the same thing. It's a senior safe program for seniors, but it's basically the same thing. You're self-reporting, maybe a higher level care, dementia, something like that, but they can self-report. Now you can see some of the limitations on that are a lot of people have a lot of pride and they don't want to self-report their own situations. So, but family members can do it. Family friends can do it. Medical personnel. So the system is available. It's just grossly underutilized, I think, in my personal opinion. So, 911. What are we doing? Excuse me. The stuff I'm going to talk about here is stuff that we've been working on since prior to Sonia Massey's murder. So I don't want you to think it's a reactionary type of thing on our part. These things were in place and moving towards these goals. They're lofty goals, but we're moving towards them way prior. So implementing a QA/QI program. That's basically quality assurance, quality improvement. That's contracted with the company to listen to our calls, and through other dispatch. There's national criteria, and we're going to outsource our calls. We're going to send the recordings, send the call ticket to an outside entity. They'll review it and they'll send us the feedback to each dispatcher. We're going to do. I think the national standard is 2%, and we're going to start with 3% of our calls. We haven't started yet, but we're very close to. I have to send them some practice things so we can get calibrated. But that's another set of eyes, and it's not, oh, Chris Mueller, he doesn't like me, so he's saying I'm doing a bad job, or this Chris Mueller, that's somebody's favorite. He says they're doing a good job. This is an outside entity telling us what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong per dispatcher on a certain segment of calls. On top of that, I want to have an internal QA/QI of all, this isn't going to be anything to most of you, echo type calls, which are pretty much the high acuity ones, heart attacks, things like that. the very, very top of the stack on medical calls. I want to have all those reviewed at 100%, but that's going to be done in-house. Not that some of those can't make the randomness that we send out, but anyway, that's about to be kicked off, so we're excited about that. We're in the throes of updating our policies and procedures. Let me jump ahead. We're moving towards accreditation, and I want to be an accredited center. Yes.
I wanted to apologize to the 911 people. I called them and I said, please don't send a combative officer to my daughter. She's having a crisis and she's not, a harm to anyone or herself. And I thought that the 911 person could control that. And I apologize because you had no control over who they sent. And I want to apologize for that.
I don't think you're in a position to apologize to anybody for anything. But thank you. But the system failed you. And that's the problem with 911. We want it to work. We want it to work 100% for each person, each time, every time. 911 is not perfect. And, we strive for perfection, but it's not a perfect system. It's not perfect here. It's not perfect anywhere. There's a lot of limitations to what we can do in 911. That said, and I'm going to sound like a broken record from the prior speaker, we've come leaps and bounds from the good old days. So, and the future is very exciting as well. And I'm jumping way ahead of myself here, but the future is also pretty bright for 911 in our capabilities. But to get back to this, we're moving. My goal ever since I started was to get CLIA accreditation. CLIA is I have to read this because I never remember what it is. Commission on the Accreditation of Law Enforcement Agencies. Now it was made for law enforcement, but they have a communications arm underneath them, and that's what we're seeking as a communication center. We are not beholden to the Springfield Police Department. We're not beholden to the Salmon County Sheriff's Office. We're not beholden to any of the EMS companies. We are an independent agency. So the actual SCCDS is an independent governmental unit. The board, yes, is who controls it and funds it is the mayor of the city of Springfield, the county board chairman, and an at-large member. But we don't, we dispatch for those entities, but we don't answer directly to them as a linear type of hierarchy. So anyway, accreditation. So what accreditation would mean for us is, again, outsourcing, opening everything up to our books, our policies, our procedures, how we do business, meeting the national standards, and allowing them to come in, look at it, and say, yep, you guys are doing, you guys are following national standards. You're very locked in. You're doing what you need to do. Anyway, it's another set of eyes, because it's one thing, if I came up here and said, Salmon County 911's the best, we're the best, that wouldn't mean much to you at all, because I'm saying it and I run the place. But to have an outside national entity come in and say that, I think that lends some credence and credibility, because it's very hard to get. It's not easy. It's not like you just pay them $100 and they come in and say, oh, if you're accredited. You have to go through a lot of work. So anyway, that's what we're heading towards. It's always been a goal, and I have an accreditation manager that's her job title is accreditation manager. I'm not accredited yet. We haven't even contacted CLIA. Trying to get our house in order before we even approach them for the accreditation portion. So we're moving towards new technologies. We're looking into maybe a new call handling system, which again doesn't mean a whole lot to you, but some of the functionalities of a new system could include real-time transcription. So a dispatcher doesn't have to type in just keywords. It'll actually transcribe, what's going on, the caller's conversation. Computers will pick up things in the background that the human ear, I won't say the human ear, the human mind can only process so much. So if somebody's telling you what's going on. There might be screaming in the background. There might be the word gun, knife, might be something yelled in the background. The computer will pick it up. So for all the scariness of AI, which I'm scared of, there looks to be a lot of benefit potentially too. It can real time transcribe. We talked about cultural barriers and language barriers. It can real time while they speak pick up the dialect, what national origin and the dialect even of voice, and have a real time so they can speak and read. It'll transcribe it for them. So I'm really excited about looking at more into these products that are coming. They're at the forefront. This is, I've already talked to a vendor, and this is about the time of year I need to really start digging into that a little bit more. Coming up to next budget year, which starts 12/1 of 25, but we got to get that in place first. Anyway, that's stuff that's moving towards the future in 911. So let's see where I'm at. Implementing QA policies, procedures. What we also have done now, this is post Sonia Massey's murder, but we have provided all of our documents to the DOJ. They have everything. We've completed it in full. Our side of the house is. We had far less to give than the sheriff's office, so don't take those knock on them. I don't know where they're at with theirs, but we have 100% of our stuff turned in to the DOJ, and we look forward to seeing what kind of feedback we get from them. The other big thing I think that I've been a part of since 22, since it started, was CESA. That's the Community Emergency Services and Supports Act. So that was 2022. We realized, the writing's on the wall. There's some disconnect. Police, jack of all trades, master of none, and everybody expected the police to do everything. Full disclosure, I'm retired from Springfield Police Department for 26 years, retired as a lieutenant there. So I know what it's like to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. Expected to do everything, to know everything, to deal with everything. That's tough. Now I wear this hat and I see it from the other side, the dispatch perspective. And I probably had to apologize to a lot of my dispatchers when I go over there, because I didn't understand their job very well when I went. I thought I did, but I didn't until I got over there. So anyway, we've been part of that since 2022 with the regional committee, not the state committee, but the Region 3 committee. So we've agreed to be a pilot center. So and it should be soon. It was supposed to have been done already, but it's the speed of government. So probably I'll tell most of you guys, speed of government is very slow. So we volunteered to be a pilot center, and we're getting ready to, when we get the marching orders from the state, that's what we're going to do. Whatever they implement, we'll keep track of, we'll keep the data, we'll report back, we'll see what works, what doesn't work. And then the state will come up with their final plan and divvy that out. But I don't know what the exact things that'll look like. They're still working with our medical provider. We do, it's called EME, Emergency Medical Dispatch. So if you call and somebody's having a baby, we can walk you through delivering a baby. If somebody calls and they're having a heart attack, we can walk you through CPR. So there's things we can do. We can help you stop bleeding. We can help you do a lot of things. Anyway, so I anticipate they're working through that company to come up with some of the things that we can do to mitigate and kind of figure out who the appropriate bodies are to send. And in a nutshell, and this is rudimentary because I don't know the finished product that's coming down, but it's basically a risk matrix of emergent, urgent, moderate, and low. And somewhere on that spectrum, the police will go. Sometimes the police will go with maybe co-respond. Other cases, the police will not go, or they could be on standby around the corner. Out of sight but close. So I don't know what that's going to look like, but it should be coming pretty soon. I think it was supposed to hit in February maybe for us, but I haven't heard anything yet. So we'll see. And again, with the CESA, different communities have different resources. We're blessed. We have Memorial Health right here in town. So, you know, what we can provide to our community is maybe far greater than what, um, you know, Brown County, Pike County, some of those counties can provide. So it's got to have a flavor to it. So it's, I don't believe CESA is going to be a one-stop shop for everyone. It will, I would imagine, this is me speculating, but it will give us things that we need to do, and in concert with our local medical directors and providers, with the resources that we have in our area, what can we provide? What can we do? What are we expected to do? But anyway, those are the things that we're doing. And like I said, we've been doing those since before July of this year, or last year, I should say. So there you go. It's not as exciting. No slides, no pictures, but so I guess I'll see what questions you guys have.
Any questions for Sunshine?
Two questions. One, can you tell me about the training that dispatch officers have to go through? How long before they're able to work on their own? I have gone through the Citizens Police Academy training, and it's not anymore, but it used to be. We went and listened, sat in on a shift with dispatch. I couldn't understand anything that was said. So I know there has to be like training before they're, you know, able to dispatch these calls. So if you can tell me about the training process, and how long that is, what it entails, and also, well, I'll say my second question next.
All right. Training, it's much longer than you think. People have this misunderstanding. They think that even our applicants sometimes, and that's why we have an attrition rate that's larger than it should be. But people think it's just, hello, oh, you need the police? Okay, police, go here. Okay, and then just sit back and wait for the next call. And it's not that at all. They are really herding cats. They're tracking all the calls. They're coordinating things with fire and EMS, and they're doing a lot of work. Anyway, training. First month is in the classroom. And then after that, they learn to be a call taker. That's how to handle the calls when they come in, how to, whatever call comes in. You don't know what it's going to be when you pick up the phone. Could be an accident, could be a robbery, could be a, you know, a whatever, barking dog. So they learn how to be a call taker. And then after the call taking phase, and the training is kind of dependent on the student and where they're going. Some sides of the house might be a little tougher than other sides of the house. Some are a little bit faster paced. Springfield Police is very hectic. They have to learn the radio side. So once they learn the phones, now they have to communicate with the first responders out there. So they learn the radio side. But it takes about 10 months to a year to train up a full-fledged dispatcher. And even then, they're not going to know it all, of course. You know, they'll know 70 or 80% and have to learn by experience, you know, the rest of it. So.
Thank you. And then my last question is, what sort of, I'm not even sure to ask this, but what sort of flexibility is there with the dispatch and what they send out, asking specifically as it relates to, and I don't know what you can say on this, but the example in my mind is what happened with Earl Moore Jr. I know in some cases fire is sent, in some cases an ambulance is sent. When this happened, the police called my organization in to watch the video, and the fire department was there and talked about how if they had responded, you know, potentially would have been different. So I'm just trying to better understand the flexibility that the dispatch has on who they send to what situations.
Seems like an easy question. It's not really an easy question because fire is very regimented. So fire is easy. I mean, I'm not, I take that back. My dispatcher is going to kill me if I say they have an easy job. They don't have an easy job. But fire is regimented. It's very regimented. So if it's this type of call, fire has everything delineated out pretty much. And this is across the board. They're very stringent on if it's this, then you send this, and this. And you say, and I'll point a map. You send this firehouse, that firehouse, and this one. So they're very regimented. In that call, in that case, I know what was said. However, it was their own protocol. They don't go to those. So I don't want to get in conflict with them, but if they want to change the protocol, we'll change the protocol. But it's their protocol, and we follow it, and we don't send. So in that case, it's really easy. Now, police, it's a little bit different. And EMS, it's yeah, EMS, it's I won't say different, but it is. That's where it gets complicated. We do the emergency medical dispatch. So now, if somebody calls in and we ask them a lot of questions about, okay, you're injured. How are you injured? Are you bleeding? Are you breathing? And we ask all these questions. It comes down to a stub toe. Okay. Um, and they want an ambulance. There's different types of ambulances. There's basic life support, BLS, and there's advanced life support, ALS. Well, we want to reserve the ALS. If you guys have heard, there's an ambulance shortage, in Springfield. And so we would like to say the ALS for major things, because if they're tied up on a stub toe or broken toe, they can't respond to the heart attacks because they're already on a call. So we try to triage a little bit. And the matrix pinpoints what type of call, and then the medical directors in Springfield have come up with a plan to, hey, this type of call, send a BLS. This type of call, we're going to send an ALS. So even that's kind of regimented. Now, police is, basically there's a crime, if there's a weapon, that's a little bit more. They're not as regimented as fire. It's not medical. Now it's everything. Now it's everything from I don't know. I'm just trying to think of examples. It could be some kids ran through my backyard to, barking dog to shots fired to whatever. And then you have to send, and we do have some canned responses, but it's basically not, it's send 2 officers or 1, or send the cavalry type of thing. So a little bit more fluid on the police side, very stringent on the fire side. And EMS, it kind of comes down to, I'll say that's a little bit more stringent. If it's a stub toe, we send this, and if it's an amputated toe, we'll send something more maybe.
Okay, thank you. That helps. And to clarify what I said about the fire, it was not trying to imply that he was saying that they should have been sent, like it was done wrong. Just, it was like if we had been on scene, so
Right.
not, want to make that clear. But also when you speak about the, being able to send the police. So in the case of Sonia Massey, there was the possibility of county showing up and cities because she lived in an area where both could respond to it. Is there, and I know you talked before about being able to see like mental health on the call, like if it's at the residence. Is there a protocol in place where if there is a known history that the city who has more of a co-responder model is the priority, or how does that work?
That it's everything's geocoded in our maps. So if it came up, that address came up as county, so that it would be county. It wouldn't be Springfield jurisdiction at all. It wouldn't have jurisdiction there. So we would have the same county. Now, in an emergent situation like a shooting or something like that, you send everybody, but the primary jurisdiction is going to be Sangamon County still. Sangamon County is not going to not go. It's just that if it's really emergent, we'll send, Grandview, Williamsville. If it's bad enough, we'll even go. So under that situation, we did send county and county only. Now for your call history, that's where this came up shortly after the incident, and no one's predicated on speed. So we want to get, again, when somebody's on the phone with you, if we have somebody available, they're going to head to the call. A lot of times, we know there's police shortages too. So that's always the case that we have an officer to send. But where was I? I lost track of where I was. So it was in the county. We're sending Salmon County Sheriff's Office. Call history. Call histories do exist, and we look them up if an officer requests us to, and if there's alert, it'll populate. Okay, so if there's alert, that's why I think that one form that we have is underutilized. Um, but sans that, we don't have time to go through all the call histories. And if we did, we would see headings. So we might see a disturbance, we might see a domestic, we might see a theft, and then they would have to dive in to see, if there's a mental health thing, and then you have to dive through call. So no, we don't do that as a I would have to hire more people to do that, to research every call. And even then, I can't delay response. It would have to be happening while people are going en route, and then we'd have to cancel people. Um,
Thank you.
I'll piggyback off of Sunshine's question about
Oh.
the
Go ahead,
Oh.
Brian. Sorry. No, go ahead.
um, with the fire being regimented, and you hinted at it being based off of protocol. Who establishes the protocol?
the fire department.
Okay. Would it then be for police, and then if it's the county division, that's the rural, it would be literally whatever department they set the protocol that your team is to follow?
Police departments are a little bit different. They're not as regimented. So they do have response guidelines. So a bank robbery, send, to traffic stop during the day. We might send backup. Second watch, you send two, or Alsh has to request backup. Third watch, you automatically send. So there's different nuances to even the time of day for backups and things. So that's not as regimented, and it's much more fluid than fire. Fire is pretty much very they're very regimented. I don't know how many more times I can say the word regimented, but
We'll find a way. Is the geocoding part of protocol, or is that something separate that you guys established, or is that, in Sunshine's example, is that something that the departments are setting, or you are part of it?
that's jurisdictional boundaries. So
Okay.
the city of Springfield is the city of Springfield. Sangamon County is the Sangamon County. It's property lines, property values, who pays what. So that follows the political real estate property lines.
Just two more. What was you would refer to it as self-reporting that's been underutilized, but then I think you also have said that it can be family, medical. What was the jargon for the form?
Oh, a premise alert program.
Purpose alert?
Premise alert program.
Premise alert.
Yeah, and that's by statute. So you probably do a premise alert program and do ILCS and Google and find the statute on it.
All right. And the last one, you had kind of mentioned the frustration I imagine your team has, where you're taking in info, but something's already happening in the background that not everybody realizes. Some resources are on their way.
Mhm.
We've also, though, talked how part of that intake of info does, though, color what resources do come. So what is it that triggers the initial resource, then that later could be supplemented or changed?
I mean, it's a myriad of things. I mean,
Okay.
if somebody says blah 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 is going on, and he's got a gun, well, now it's a different response.
Let me, yeah, because it could be 1,000, I'm sure, for you guys. And this is my ignorance of the system, but is there someone else? Because as you pointed out in the training, there's the call taking and there's the radio training. So you're obviously reaching out, or someone's reaching out. Is someone doing that reach out separate from the dispatch intake? Okay.
Most of the time, yes. Yeah, just about all the time, that is.
That's all I have.
Yeah. Okay. Hang on. Miss Donna, you have a question?
Some of these cases are people getting treated different, like Black people, people of color. Is there a way that they can be stiffer on being prejudiced and answering a call for help? Because when we call for help, all we get is beat down and mayhem. There should be a protocol where they could get fired. Like, now, as soon as they find out that they're prejudiced and they treated us different, when are they gonna make a law where you cannot put prejudice in the way of your job?
Prejudice should never be in the way of a job, ever, in any job or anywhere in life, actually. Um, you know, I
You did Earl Moore, that's prejudice. They would have never did that to anybody else.
kind of speechless. I mean, I know I can't comment on the ambulance
The
company.
fire, and nobody said a thing, and everybody watched George Floyd get killed, and watched. Nobody ran up and said, "Hey, guy, you got to get off his neck. He's dying here." When are we gonna have training for them to get in trouble for that?
You know, and I'm probably speaking out of bounds as myself as a director, so I'll speak as Chris Mueller for this part. But that was a perfect time for unity, the George Floyd one, because everybody agreed. Everybody agreed. Cops agreed. The community agreed. There was nobody that disagreed with that, and yet we were still divided. I thought that was a lost opportunity. Again, that's Chris Mueller speaking, not Director Mueller. But I thought that was a lost opportunity because everybody agreed that was bad. I didn't, anyway.
We're so afraid of the police that we won't even intervene when we're watching somebody get killed in front of God and everybody on national TV. We're so afraid of the police. I'm afraid of the police. I told them I'm afraid of them on my 911 call. And when are we going to teach a class where they can get in trouble for being prejudiced? You cannot put prejudice in your line of duty.
I agree.
Hello, Director Mueller.
It's on OC.
Yeah. This new program where you're talking about the transcribing of a conversation, is that going to be on the incident report underneath the CAD narrative, or how is that information going to be reported in?
No idea yet. I have to look into it. I mean, I saw a demo at a conference last year. I was intrigued, and then I had the company come up and give me a demo in the at the center. But I need to get to that was all kind of fluffy, high level, sales type stuff. And so now I need to get into the weeds and really get into specifics as to what it can do, what it can't do, beyond what a salesman tells me it can do and cannot do. Because no offense for anybody in sales out there, but I know that
My iPhone gives a transcription from voice to writing
mhm.
on when somebody leaves me a call. So I mean, the technology's there.
I know it's there. I just need to see it in practice and see how it's going to be integrated into our CAD system, because we have a lot of really expensive software and they have to integrate. So nothing's independent. So if I have the phone system, it's got to work with the CAD system, which has to work with the radio system, and then all that has to be recorded. Um, all this stuff has to mesh and has to work. I can't have hey, this works with three of the pieces, but not the fourth. And it's no good to me. So I have to get in the weeds basically and do a deep dive on that and see if it's feasible for our center. And this is one company. There's a couple other companies out there, so I probably have to do an RFP.
Do they have AI with it?
I'm sorry.
Do they have AI with it?
This particular one that I was looking at does.
Okay.
I used an example more of what the future holds than being beholden to a certain vendor, because I'm not beholden to a certain vendor. So I
Right.
want to be clear on that.
Okay. And when do you plan on or actually maybe implementing this?
Well, I would like to start now in all the research, and if feasible, I would like to probably next budget year when I can budget for it. And I have to see what the costs are too. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm a fiscal conservative, so I don't like to be willy-nilly with the public's money. So I need to make sure it's worth it. Because it could do all this stuff, but if it costs $8 billion, well, we can't do it here.
Yeah.
But if it's reasonable, then I would like to see it implemented by 12/1 when our new fiscal year, or purchased anyway.
Okay. Also, to my next question, So I know on some calls, the dispatchers, they're able to see, they'll sometimes radio out 1096, which I guess that's mental subject. So is there an alert that pops up? Like, for example, if somebody gives you an address, is there like a box that can pop up that say previous 1096 calls at this address or tied to this name or phone number?
It can, but that's under the premise alert program. If it's not reported, it won't. But, you know, I wonder, you know, with all this and knowing I was coming here and that AI, I'm wondering if AI can't sort through those calls instead of a human, sort through those and have something populate. But I don't know that for a fact because we can't label people. You know, as a dispatch center, we can't label and say, you know, Mr. Christian, you know what, he was weird, so he's crazy. You know, we can't put a label on you. Um,
But they do say that.
we'll say things, you know, we use a code if we have enough indicators or if somebody indicates us or we see it on a history, but we can't put that in a system and have a file on somebody that follows you around and, you know, says that, so now every reaction, every time you might meet, you know, first responder, they're treating you, you know, something differently and you don't know why, because we have
Right.
this little secret file. We can't have that, you know.
Okay. And how often do they go back and review the previous tickets? I mean, do they always do it or it's just sometimes?
No, that's it's pretty much on request. And
Okay.
so if the officer wants a premise history, we'll go and research it. Otherwise, you know, it takes time because we have to know what they're looking for too. They might say, "Hey, check this history, check this house or this address for a certain type of event." And you know, the elephant in the room is you know, it's getting to a bigger topic, but behavioral health over the phone. It's not identifiable a lot of times. You know, unless somebody really calls and says I'm having a crisis or something, then it's identifiable. Or if you have a second party caller um, who indicates that you know my daughter son is having the husband is having an episode, but a lot of times we get a third party caller. They're driving by and they see erratic behavior. They that were a good example of how just not in this area, but one call can become another. We can get a barking dog call, but it turns out to be a burglary. You know, things that we get at the dispatch center. oh, and this is where I had to apologize to my dispatchers because we always chewed them out for, no, what just send me this for? It wasn't that, it was this. You know what? Listen to the tape. This is what we got from the caller. This is what they said. This is what we sent you on. If you found something else, you know, we can't control that. And that's the hard part. That's the hardest piece of this puzzle. I will tell you, working with SASA and everything else is, um, and he said it himself, you could have people up there talking for 15 minutes, you wouldn't know it. You would have no idea they have a behavioral issue at all. And so we get people that call on the phone. Well, it's this, it's that, it's the other thing, and we dispatch accordingly. And then when officers get to the scene, they find something totally different than what we, you know, call I had many years ago was a woman who called and said she shot herself in the head. And we get there and she was buck naked on the back porch, no gun, no anything. You know, it was just but that was the call we went to. And
And
that's the
that would
call we got.
and that would probably be a history of a 1096.
Well, that was the 90s. I'm gonna date myself a
Okay.
little bit, but that was a long time ago
Okay.
when that occurred. But anyway, that's just an example of what you're sent to and what you get are, and that happens more often than not.
All right. And I have two more questions, and that'll be my last. How do you guys balance tickets or calls in the order of priority?
Uh,
'Cause
police have a priority, you know, armed robberies, you know, things where shootings, things like that are always going to be high. Same with medical. You go to the emergency room, and if you stub your toe, you're going to sit there for hours.
Yeah.
You know, they're going to take everybody else. So it's a triage kind of thing. We have the same thing,
Oh,
depending on the call type.
okay. And then my last question is, you've did you go back and listen to the dispatch logs or dispatch tapes for the night of the Sonia Massey murder?
I had to pull them all. Yes,
Okay.
I haven't listened to them in some time, but I have.
So there's in that log or in that call or dispatch recording, there is somebody said self-inflicted. Do you know where that came from? and which particular, maybe which radio ID did it, or which officer, or was it a dispatcher that said it, or where did that wording come from?
That was, now see, you're testing my memory, but it was believed. I think it was just inferred, maybe. I don't know. I'd have to review that and get back with you on that. I'm not dodging it at all.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember correctly. I know that that happened, and I don't know if it's an inference based on the information, the way the wording of the call on the radio was. But, oh, just
Because I know
a
that there was,
dispatcher asked, and there was a quick blip of a radio traffic. No, a dispatcher asked, if my memory is correct. And there was a very quick blip of the mic.
right,
Okay, so for those of you who don't have a radio ear, I mean, if you listen to radio all the time, you can hear, and that's like 10-4. Okay, so and it's that quick and it's that sharp and it's that whatever. It's just a blip of the radio, and I think they heard a blip of the radio like that.
well, it wasn't a blip of the radio. It actually says like self-inflicted.
Yeah. But they asked, and
Okay.
then there was a blip of the radio in response, and I think it was inferred that that was a 10-4, short for 4. But I'm telling you, it's a millisecond. I mean, it's that quick, and to be that clear on the radio, it could have been a bump mic. It could have been anything. So anyway, I think that's where it was inferred. Obviously not. It didn't happen, but.
And when they radio in, like with the radio traffic, can you tell like specifically the radio ID that came in? So like, let's say for example, it's I don't know, Lincoln 639 calls into dispatch or presses their button. Would dispatch be able to see that is Lincoln 639 that's calling into the dispatch?
In most cases, yes.
Okay, so during that time, wherever that self-inflicted, was that an officer radio that it came in saying self-inflicted?
It was.
Okay, was it a sheriff, county sheriff that said it, or SPD?
It was a sheriff's department. I don't know
Now,
how much further I can go down this this rabbit hole with you. Like he said, I just think it's going to be a huge mess later on. So
who made the,
that's not. I don't even remember right now.
Okay.
So and that's 100% honest. I do not recall.
was it a primary or a secondary unit on scene? Was it a primary?
I don't know. I can't recall who said that.
Okay.
Um,
But there is a record showing which radio ID called in stating self-inflicted.
I will go and check, but yes, I believe so.
Okay. All right. That's what I wanted to know.
Since we'd like you to go as far down that rabbit hole as you can.
I know, but I'm also still a public servant. I'm still employed by the county. I
And
still
that-
have my marching orders too. So I'm trying to be
understand.
respectful, but
I understand.
I can't
but
get
wanna
into
go-
the
I want to
deep,
go
deep,
as far as you can.
weeds of the stuff. And plus, again, I pulled the tapes and disseminated them to the law enforcement agencies that investigated, but I didn't peruse and study them myself. I didn't, it wasn't my purview. So I pulled them. Yes, I heard them all. I gathered them up, and I had to redact, what I could. So I heard them a few times, but that was way back then. I haven't listened to those in a long time, and I certainly didn't follow the scorecard to see, which numbers are lining up with who said what. So.
What record would that be on? Like, let's say somebody sent a FOIA request. What record would that radio ID be on? Where it shows the who said what, when they radioed in, and so forth.
There was and I just found out I had this ability right around that time. Maybe it was this call. I didn't know I had the ability to print out a radio traffic and a sheet to go along with it that kind of goes down. Now, it wouldn't be perfect because there's some radio traffic that for whatever reason is X'd out, no malice. It'd be 1 in 100, but there's a red X for some reason didn't pick up, the computer didn't pick up for whatever. And I don't know if that shows on that thing, so that would make the timeline off. You would think that everybody else it's one off. So, but that it's a sheet that goes with it. I don't know what you call. I can't remember what the sheet's called. I think I discovered it right about maybe that call. There was three things that happened right around that time, big cases in Springfield or Sangamon County, and
Well, remember that sheet because I'm sending over a FOIA request. So here's another question too. I know dispatching officers, they have the capability of having a chat conversation between
Yeah.
computers and so forth. Are those computer chats monitored for different conversation types, such as if it
we don't monitor them at dispatch. I can't tell you what the departments might do, but
Okay.
we don't monitor them. They're not on the computer, unless you're talking to dispatch.
yeah, like they'll
If
send
it's
like
car to car, that's between the car and car. It's not, doesn't come
well,
through our
I'm talking
cell phone.
about the communication between dispatch and a car.
We're talking about the same thing, I think.
But you said car to car. But what I was saying is because I think it was like a chat conversation that
It's the
came
same,
out.
it's the same system. So,
Okay.
so it's the same computer system. They can
Mhm.
send a message to dispatch, a dispatch back, or they can send it me to you and dispatch is out of it. So
But what I'm saying is that the conversation between dispatch and police, are those conversations monitored?
no,
Okay.
that's the one dispatcher at that console is the one typing back like a text or something, I guess
Yeah.
you would. And that's it. It doesn't go to a supervisor. It doesn't go, we don't monitor those.
How long do you guys keep those chats for?
It's a good question. I've never been asked that. I assume that's good. I don't know. Radio traffic we keep for 90 days, but the call detail reports we keep, forever. I don't know how long the car to car CAD
So
stuff
wait a
is.
minute, the radio traffic that deletes in 90 days?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's preserved obviously because it's a big case. Once it's preserved, it's preserved. So it's not gone. We
Okay.
recorded it, but a day to day traffic stop,
Mhm.
90 days, it's gone.
Okay. I didn't know that part, so.
Okay, we have time for a couple of more questions and then we have to move on to voting. Hang on, give Ms. Donna a mic, please.
She, that, that call, the call, what were you just saying about when the dispatch sent, who said it was self-inflicted?
So when they call in the radio ID, it'll show which officer called into dispatch at a particular time and said what.
And then the second call was that we don't know, it's under investigation. So there's two cover-ups back to back.
Veronica?
Yes, thank you. What activities or what type of strategy do you have to work on building trust with the community? And I'm not talking about marketing, and going to schools and things like that, but really because we know that there are communities that are not calling 911 even when they should, right? When they're at a greater risk and so on. And that is an issue of trust. So in your capacity as director, what are the strategies? What do you think you should be doing to build that trust with the community?
That's a good question. It's probably an area we could improve because, obviously we are in an interaction in their whatever the strife they're going through that makes them call, but we're not probably the biggest impression. That's usually the responders that make the impression the most. Not saying we're perfect, not saying we haven't made bad impressions on and handle calls correctly. Um, but we have to, that's predicated on, if I tell you, the public, call us because you're going to get service. And then I send Jerry Castles out and he's a jerk. I just want to say Jerry Castles is a jerk. That undermines everything I've done. And I don't know because it's predicated on, a partnership with these other agencies. And that's not just Springfield Police, that's county, that's Auburn, Divernon, the EMS companies that, everybody, every interaction has to be positive. Throughout the county for 911.
So you recognize that there is a gap, right? Between calling and talking to the dispatcher or whoever is taking my call for an emergency, right? And then the interaction that follows, or that was a historic interaction. There is history, and I'm not going to call. So I think that you're indirectly answering that it's a work to do with the other agencies.
Well, I think it's work to do with us all. I'm not saying we're perfect
Mhm.
either. The day I say we're perfect is the day I need to retire, because we're never going to be perfect, and we always have to strive to be better, no matter how good we get. If we get accredited, I'll be happy as a lark. That doesn't mean we're done. That just means we achieved here, but we always want to be here, and you'll never get to here. And that's personal, professional, everywhere in life, everybody. So I'm not going to throw all the entities under the bus without throwing ourselves under the bus. We can all do better. But it takes everybody, because I can go to a scene, and I'm not going to beat police up on this example, because they get beat up enough. But say dispatch sends to a car accident, we send dispatch takes the call, we send police, fire, and EMS. That's a call. It takes everybody. And say the fire department's rude. Oh, you just ruined it for everyone. Why am I going to call 911? Because they were jerks. That guy didn't treat me right, whatever. And that's what they're going to remember. That's what they're going to tell their friends. If they're treated right, they won't tell anybody. That's how it works. You get good service at a restaurant, you think, man, I had good service. You don't tell anybody about it. You had bad service, you tell everybody. And it just takes the one. It could be the restaurant's full of great servers. You got the jerk. And that's what gives us all the name. So it's got to be a partnership all across the board for good customer service. And unfortunately, I have one purview, one part of this puzzle. And, we 45 first responder agencies, one bad apple, or one person having a bad day, not even a bad firefighter, cop, EMS, just one person having that one moment where they snap and say something they shouldn't, can ruin it. Ruin that person's impression of the 911 system.
Sante.
There's two in the room here.
I'm not sure if you answered this question or not. From when Sonia called, I know that she called both 911. You know, she called the county and she called the city. She clearly felt more comfortable with the city. She did not want to hang up with the city when the county was there. Is there any way that you all work together in that instance where when someone feels more comfortable with one entity versus the other?
Let me ask you to repeat your question. You say Sonia called both city. I mean,
She called the county and she called the city.
On the two different. You mean being at her mom's house and being at her house?
At her house, she called the count. Well, she called. They obviously came out, and then she called the city. She felt a little more comfortable with the city 911 dispatch, and she was not trying to hang up with the city dispatch.
If you call 911, you get whoever's in the room.
Okay.
So there's no city 911. There's no county 911.
Okay.
In 911, you get anybody in the room at any given time. So.
Got you. I know that she was talking with the city, and then they said that they were going to defer to the county.
The initial call came with the city. Then she called again, but there was just silence.
Okay.
And I believe the deputy was already on scene when she called. But there was just rustling around. I did listen to those two calls today.
Yeah.
But that was it. But if my recollection is correct, she called, she got a city dispatcher for the first call. And when the city dispatcher was trying to get her phone number, she hung up or the phone was disconnected. And then the second call, I believe, was after deputies were on scene. I don't know if contact had been made yet.
Was it where they called her? Was the second call where they called her back? And then it was an answer, and then it was a wrestling. And then when she was in her living room, then that's when I believe she called.
Then she called. Okay,
Yeah,
then
so I
she
think
called
it's
again. Then I'm sorry, but that was. I don't think that was a 911 call when she called. Anyway,
I heard the dispatcher, so the third call was 911.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
no, I don't. I didn't dig that deep into it, so I don't know. I know she made. If that one was a callback, it was a callback.
Yeah.
With the rustling sound.
Yeah, that was the second one.
Okay. So I didn't listen to the third one then. I just saw the first two. And
yeah, I think the third one was when she was on the couch, and then they asked her, was the deputies there, and then they hung up.
I remember that call now, but I didn't listen to that one today, so.
Okay, we're going to move to Kristen. We are really behind, so we.
Okay, I have a ton of questions because our work group is really interested in talking to you, and maybe we can have you come to our work group for a separate meeting, because with both CESA and 911 services, it's something that we're trying to focus on. So, and I know a couple other work groups are too. So maybe that's something that we can further explore. A couple of questions that I have real quick are, is there a way to report the dispatch system if somebody feels like they didn't get an appropriate response from dispatch?
From the dispatch center itself,
Yes.
it's, you call me, I guess, I'm the director. The hierarchy though is, for me, it's the mayor, the county board chairman, and an at-large member. It's the board. So, and other type of oversight, I don't think we really have that.
Okay.
So it'd be me. But I was internal affairs at Springfield Police for 6 years, so I'm kind of adept in the art of complaints
That's
and investigating my own. So
all right. Thank you. And then another question I have is the Promise Alert program that you mentioned. You said that people can self-report by address instances of mental health or different things that they want the dispatch team to know. And does that come up as like this large, like you kind of mentioned, like a red light that they are going to know every time somebody calls from this address, or is that also something that people are going to have to sift through in order to tell the police off or the dispatch team once they're
it does
dispatched?
pop up on screen. I can't tell you how it pops up. I'm not a
Okay.
dispatcher, never have been. I couldn't do the job. I couldn't do the job. I know my limitations, and I can't multitask like that. So I've never seen it pop up. I'm not on the CAD system that they're on, but it does pop up as an alert on them, and it's also visible to the officer responding to the scene as well. If the dispatcher misses it, I believe there's something on their screen too that they can check, or maybe that's
With
a
the
manual.
lead system
That
or
could be a
something like
manual
that?
thing for them, but I'll have to check into that.
Okay.
But it does pop up for the dispatch somewhere, somehow. I don't know
Okay.
exactly
I'll
how.
stop for now in terms of time, but I'd love to get your information so that we can connect later.
Okay, and one final question I have for you is the system that Christian was just referring to that you said is underutilized, woefully underutilized. Are there any efforts currently to get that advertised more or to put that information out to the citizens so they know they can call and utilize that?
That's an area we need to improve at. We had something, I want to say it was 2018, where we had a big, huge meeting at, Jerry, you might have been there, I'm not sure, at Memorial St. John's. Large room, a lot of players in the community, behavioral health, and this was going to be a thing. The doctor's offices were going to give these things out, or maybe fill them out for people and do all this work. And then we thought, okay, here comes the rush. Here they all come, and nothing. So it just didn't. I don't know if it comes from people's own stigma of not wanting to self-report, or people not want. I don't know. I don't know why. But we do need to get the word out more.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Mueller. We'll do the public comment at the end. We just have to move through okay, but it can come at the end. We just have to move through the resolution process quickly.
Thank you, Director Mueller.
Okay, we are going to now switch gears to our final agenda item of the evening. The very first presentation, as you may recall, made to the Massey Commission was from County Board members Gina Latham and Tony DelGiorno regarding hiring rules for the Sheriff's Office. This matter has been deliberated by the Law Enforcement Work Group, and today one of the co-leads of that work group, Sunshine Clemens, is ready to present a resolution for action by the full commission. Commissioner Clemens, please present your motion.
Thank you. As it's been stated, this was the first ask of the commission was for review and suggested changes to practices related to hiring at the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office. That request was immediately sent to the Law Enforcement Training, Wellness, and Cultural Competency Work Group for review and recommendations. And the Massey Commission Resolution 3, changes to hiring process at the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office, is the direct result of this ask from the county board, community, and this commission. This resolution has been sent to both the Sheriff's Office and the Deputy Mayor Commission for review. I'm going to read the resolution quickly due to time, but in full for the benefit of the audience, both in person and virtually, who may not have been able to be present when this when this language was discussed. Massey Commission Resolution 3, changes to hiring process at the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office. Whereas the Massey Commission was established as a citizens commission in response to the tragic killing of Sonia Massey by a former Sangamon County deputy in July 2024. Whereas this tragedy and the subsequent information revealed about the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office highlighted concerns regarding the hiring process in the Sheriff's Office. Whereas the Sangamon County Board requested that the Massey Commission consider several specific proposals regarding changes to the hiring process, and the Massey Commission assigned this matter to its law enforcement, hiring, training, wellness, and cultural competency work group for further study. Whereas the law enforcement, hiring, training, wellness, and cultural competency work group discussed and consider these proposals on the December 2nd, 2024 meeting. Now therefore be it resolved by the members of the Massey Commission on this 13th day of January 2025 that the Sangamon County Board and the Sangamon County Sheriff's Department adopt the following changes to the hiring process at the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office. The Internal Affairs Department of the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office shall conduct background checks of applicants that include, in addition to existing requirements, FOIA requests of any public agency personnel file, review of social media accounts or posts with particular scrutiny given to membership in and involvement with known hate groups. The Southern Poverty Law Center defines a hate group as an organization or collection of individuals that, based on official statements or principles, the statements of its leaders or its activities, has beliefs or practices that attack or malign an entire class of people, typically for their immutable characteristics. An organization does not need to have engaged in criminal conduct or have followed their speech with actual unlawful action to be labeled a hate group, and review of involvement in several legal proceedings with particular attention to orders of protection or similar civil judgments. All applicants at the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office, including entry-level and lateral hires, shall undergo the same hiring procedures such as testing and background checks. Employment shall be prohibited for any applicant who has a conviction for a Class A misdemeanor within 5 years prior to application, or has 2 or more Class A misdemeanor convictions in the 10 years prior to application, or has ever been placed on the Brady list. The Deputy Mayor Commission shall review all applicants and their background checks and shall formally vote on any offer of employment after the sheriff requests approval to hire. A negative vote of the Deputy Mayor Commission shall preclude a candidate's hire with the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office. Approved by the Massey Commission Law Enforcement, Hiring, Training, Wellness, and Cultural Competency Work Group on January 6, 2025.
Okay, a motion has been presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Veronica, Kristen. Okay. Is there any discussion on the motion?
What about drug testing? Cause I bet you Sean was, son was, high. They should be tested for drugs on a regular basis.
Okay. Okay, Ms. Donna. So, Sanjay, can you take that down? Or write that down and then, thank you. Any other, oh, Brian had some discussion points.
Yeah. I won't belabor it, and I do apologize that I'm not gonna be able to support this. I did just want to walk through things. We've had a long night, and this is all recorded, so we can go back. So this resolution's asking to adopt some hiring practices. Felt like the sheriff came to us and said a handful of things that she's adopting. I tried to go back as best I could through some of the slides, so we'll just point out a few. On 1A of the resolution, I believe her slides, page 6, slide 1, page 7, slide 1, and page 10 of her presentation addressed a lot of that. B, 1B of the resolution, page 5, slide 2, page 8, slide 1, and page 9, slide 2. Maybe didn't go as far, but I think some of what we do, I think we should be a little mindful of conversations we probably could have, rather than just putting everything in a resolution all the time. I don't know that she would be against adding the words hate group to, I think, what one of the slides used derogatory or derogatory, sorry. So I think some of that could probably just be a conversation. Resolution 1C. I did not admittedly find exactly this in her presentations, but page 6, slide 2, and page 7, slide 1 did to me at least seem to indicate that the investigation would pull up these things and would be relevant to the hiring process. Resolutions number 3, A and B. I think we probably, I would be interested in more discussion. It took a while, but it looks like on the Illinois books, there are at least 100 Class A misdemeanors. And when you go through them, there are a lot that I think that there would be some fair discussion on whether they are relevant to whether somebody would be a good law enforcement officer. I think there would be an unfortunate unintended consequence with 100 Class A misdemeanors that somebody could be convicted of, getting in the way actually of some disparate impact, depending on who has those convictions in an equity environment. 3C, I will plead some ignorance on the Brady list. It's my understanding that it's about one of 4 cases since the 1970s, including a Supreme Court case that's otherwise referred to as Giglio. It's my understanding that most of the counties have their own process. I would probably be more interested in what our county does or does not include. There are certainly some nefarious things that go on the Brady list or reasons to be put on the Brady list. But in looking at the practice around the state, it didn't look consistent, and it looked like not everything was the nefarious exculpatory evidence being withheld that could lead to somebody being on the Brady or Giglio list. So at a minimum, more discussion on that to have a better understanding of what past and current state's attorneys do and putting on there. Resolution 4, the Deputy Merit Commission, that seemed to be pretty explicitly in the sheriff's page 12, slide 2. And I just have a little concern, that's about 6 things that we'd be putting in a resolution to tell the sheriff to adopt something that she literally just came to us and told us that she was adopting. I think part of this process, it will be important to have an interaction with some of these officers, because we're probably going to be making some much harder asks than even this down the road. The last 2 things, and my apologies, but just trying to get it out of the way. I noticed that the Chicago PD, they referred to it in their rule of conduct as a Rule 14 with regards to false statements. I have not seen the collective bargaining agreement for the county, but that may be something for us to look into as to what false statement guidance there is in the collective bargaining agreement. And then the last one was the prohibitions that regarding the misdemeanors. Sorry, the one I mentioned before, the false statement, that's to the Brady and Giglio list. And then the prohibitions for misdemeanors, I would be interested of, you know, what the common practice is around the state. I think we should probably be a little mindful also of the surrounding areas. And if we're going to make a county recommendation while we are a county commission, we should probably consider making those recommendations for any department, any and every department in the county, when we make those recommendations. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Susan and then Bob.
Brian, would you give an example of a Class A misdemeanor that you think would not be relevant to hiring of an officer?
I appreciate the question. What I would say is process-wise, I'd rather not be put in a situation to have to go through. What I would say is I'm happy to distribute. It took me a while. There's 100 of them.
I'm just curious what some of those might be. I'm not going to.
I know. My guess is the votes are there tonight. I'll share it, and then we'll probably have more time. This would be an example of probably what I would rather have been a larger discussion than, hey, do you want to vote on this?
This is the place we have the conversation, as far as I know.
Yeah, and after 4 hours, I'm happy to show it to you. What's that? Because they'll just get called out.
One answer. One. All she's asking. It's what we're all here for.
Okay.
In fairness, I am more than happy to read through all of them.
In subcommittee, like when?
Okay, so we're going to bring this back to the commission. And Susan had a question. She offered the question. Brian, if you're not prepared to answer that question right now, you can research the misdemeanors you're talking about and then have a conversation with Susan.
It's more about
Or
time.
we could just go to vote after we hear from everyone else. Okay? Bob?
Two things. First of all, just as a matter.
Can you use the microphone, Bob? Thank you.
Is it on?
It's on.
Oh, okay.
I think so.
Two things, just as a matter of form, it's pretty straightforward that the county board has no say on this. The county board is in no position to tell the sheriff's office to do this. And so it's more a recommendation to the sheriff's department.
Mm-hmm.
So just as a matter of form, mentioning the county board as part of it is probably wrong. Secondly, no matter what the current sheriff does by way of policy and hiring, it's only a policy. And the next sheriff can come along and say, well, no, I want to do it the old way. I think that if we gave a friendly letter to the sheriff suggesting these things while we're exploring how it can be made permanent, which is at another level, that's at the state level. And I think that we can communicate. I don't know the specifics. I don't know what a Class A misdemeanor is. But the long and the short of it is that no matter what the sheriff does, the next sheriff can change it. And so I'm thinking that the sheriff made a lot of, by the way, thanks for, Brian, thanks for circulating that. Hey, Brian, thanks for circulating that. So I'm just saying that an argument here really, we can't decide it. We can recommend it. She's made a lot of changes. And I don't know what this adds to what she's doing. So I think that we ought to let Brian find the answers that we want and return to this.
Questions? Sunshine, this is a question for you. Is the, if this is not going as a resolution to the county board, if this is a communication with the sheriff, what do you think about the idea of formulating it as a letter from us? Um, Maybe both saying we appreciate the things that you have said you're putting in place, and we hope you will do these other things too, or we're asking you to do these other things too, or we're expecting you to do these other things too.
I'm fine with the letter in addition to this. I still, the reason I recognize, and we talked about this in the work group, that a lot of these things are things that Sheriff Crouch has already stated that she's going to do. As it's been stated, that a lot of it's voluntary. She doesn't have to do it. And I think a resolution is a stronger way to urge that this be um, like more permanently implemented over a letter. A letter in addition to this is fine with me. We can take out a full page ad in the paper. I don't really care. But I do think that we are asked for recommendations, and I feel like recommendations should come in a more in a format more conducive with the type of entity that we are. So a letter, this plus a letter, but doing a letter to me isn't better than an actual resolution.
It also occurs to me that she, as sheriff, was telling us about the kinds of changes she's making, but for us to back that up and say, yep, these are the things that we think are really important,
Right.
may strengthen her position in making those changes.
And I also think that if 6 months down the line, she gets a better job in another state and she leaves and the next person comes in, we at least have this saying, we supported, what she had in place, plus, the other things that maybe aren't a part of what she's done so far. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Any other discussion from the commission?
I have
Jerry?
just one comment. Kind of goes along with what Brian said. I agree with it, and it's my understanding that, like Sunshine said, where this is just a recommendation. But I can see Brian's point in like Class A misdemeanor. Let's say somebody gets a suspended license, and they end up getting arrested for driving while suspended. That is a Class A misdemeanor. 5 years down the road, really. So I see that point of it. My thinking was, since I'm on that same subcommittee, was that I'm sure the sheriff's office or whoever makes the ultimate decision on this can narrowly define what Class A misdemeanors or what specific ones to put in place on it. But to me, just because it is just a recommendation, not to make light of it by any means or Brian's concerns. But I would still think we should move forward and along with what Sunshine said, that it's just, let's push it out there, let them define it.
Okay, any other
I just real quick, I agree with that as well. So, for example, in this, it says has a conviction for a Class A misdemeanor within 5 years prior to application. I just want to also point out too that this blanket recommendation may not actually technically be legal because under the Illinois Human Rights Act, it states employers may only consider criminal convictions if there is a substantial relationship between the offense and the job, or if employing the individual will pose an unreasonable risk to property or the safety of others. So even with recommending this resolution, um, I would suggest that maybe not necessarily all, but maybe narrow it down or use the language where it's a substantial relationship between the offense and the job, such as a DUI. I mean, if you had a DUI, why would you be behind the vehicle of a Sangamon County Sheriff vehicle? Because majority of your job is driving and being out in the public. So I just want to just bring that up too, as far as the Illinois Human Rights Act.
Thank you for adding that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'm happy we can put in that change. my thought process initially was an officer is to uphold the law, so all of them were relevant to the job was my thought process. But I understand your point.
And you never know too. For example, like let's say if you're 21 years old, you get into it with a girlfriend or something like that, and girlfriend tell you to leave, and then you get, charged with a trespassing charge or something. And that was, say, 3 years down the road, you're trying to apply to become Sangamon County Sheriff, so
Wait 2 more
just,
years.
huh?
Wait 2 more
Yeah, I
years.
guess you could. But we could also out on maybe some great officers too. So as far as a sheriff's deputy.
So I appreciate the human rights component, although I agree with Sunshine. If your job is to uphold the law and there's something in your background that violates the law, I think that is a serious consideration. Here's a short list. It may not be all 100. Aggravated assault, battery, domestic battery, violation of order of protection, reckless conduct, endangering the health or life of a child, theft under $500, possession of stolen property, retail theft, criminal trespass, criminal defacement, criminal unlawful possession of a firearm, resisting arrest, possession of cannabis, 30 to 100 grams, possession of drug paraphernalia, possession of alcohol by a minor, theft of a motor vehicle, driving on a revoked or suspended license, fleeing or attempting to elude a police officer, leaving the scene of an accident, with an unattended vehicle, driving under the influence, reckless driving, street racing, aggravated speeding, 35 miles an hour or more.
And I will add in that was um, the breadth of the list was why we said within the last 5 years only, because we do recognize that someone can do something when they're young in college or whatever, and then they can grow and move past that. But within the last 5 years, you most likely are the same person. So that was our sort of that was our way of trying to address the issue that's being discussed right now.
Becoming more mature.
Right.
Yeah.
So what we have now is that if Sunshine wants to amend her motion in any way, she can do that. Or we can proceed to a vote.
I do want to amend and add in what Ms. Donna said regarding the drug testing. I'm happy to do whatever she asks. So if she wants that language in, I'm happy to do that. And I don't remember if there was another recommendation for.
The only other recommendation was Bob recommending a letter as opposed to a resolution. You responded that you would be amenable to a letter in addition to the resolution.
And Calvin proposed to add the language as is pertinent to the job or something like that. What was
Civil
that?
Well,
rights.
I mean, it's
Civil rights.
technically based off the law, so I mean,
Yeah.
you can or cannot include it, but at the end of the day, I mean, they still got to look at the fact that, it's just still Illinois compiled statutes. It's still a law, so.
Right.
But another thing, I'm sorry, but another thing too, though, is that yes, I think we definitely need to send this out tonight. And I say that too, because when Sheriff Crouch was here last time, I mean, we pretty much asked her if another individual such as Grayson was to apply to become Sangamon County Sheriff, could he potentially be hired? And she basically said yes. So we need to at least have something where we're recommending to put a stop to where somebody with 2 DUIs should not be hired with the Sangamon County Sheriff's Department. So that's why, I mean, you have my yes vote because it needs to be sent out now, in my opinion. So.
Thank you.
So is drug testing not a part of the requirements?
It's my understanding that there's no law enforcement agency that doesn't require drug testing. That's already a part of the hiring process.
Okay, that's okay.
But
What the sheriff did mention when she was here was that she proposed adding anabolic steroids because it's about what drugs are being tested for. The majority of law enforcement, if not all law enforcement, I can only speak for my own, in the Illinois State Police, you are tested for all illicit, illegal substances. The sheriff said she wanted to make sure that in addition to those, she was now going to propose anabolic steroids because that's presenting a problem within law enforcement as well.
Is that something that you would include in your resolution then?
You mean the anabolic steroids?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I also suggested that it go to the sheriff. I also suggested that it go to the sheriff and drop the mention of the county board. The county board's powerless in this.
This has already been sent to the sheriff, so it will be resent again when we add the new language with the drug testing. But I still think it should go to the county board, even if they can't. They need to know and they need to hear it directly from us, even if they, can or won't do it, can't do anything about it. I think that they quote unquote oversee us. They created us. I think everything that in my opinion,
Well,
they should know. They should receive it.
we didn't recommend to the county board that letters go to DOJ, ISP, and the AG. We decided to do it. This is parallel to that. Now, it's a small thing, and as a matter of fact, I even said, well, as a matter of form.
Thank you.
Anything else before we move to a vote?
One more quick thing. And I don't know if you necessarily want to attach it into this in regards to the drug testing, but what about the random drug testing after they're hired too? Because from my understanding, the correctional officers, they don't have the random drug testing. It's only the deputies. And then I think it's a certain percentage. But that's just another ideal if you want to attach it in there or not. Oh, and I forgot, it's in their
Collective bargaining.
collective bargaining. So maybe suggest it for when it comes time to renew it or negotiations.
Renegotiate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is only for people that
Okay.
are for the
Hiring.
first
Okay.
hires. The rest of that is going to have to be addressed separately.
Okay, great.
Where they have to have the test every 6 months, once a year. I mean, like, they gotta be scared straight, just like everybody else.
I think we can definitely look at recommendations for once they're hired, but in this particular resolution, this is for people who are not officers yet, who are applying to become officers. So it would be in a separate resolution, but I definitely think that that's something that should be looked at and put together.
Point of clarification, if I may. Bob, were you suggesting that in the now therefore be it resolved sentence that we take out the Sangamon County Board?
Yeah.
And that it say that now therefore be it resolved by the members of the Massey Commission on this 13th day of January 2025 that the Sangamon County Sheriff's Department adopt the following changes?
Yeah.
If we were to make that change and we send this action to the board, would that meet the subcommittee's?
That's fine with me. I just want this to still go to the board because they sent they sent it to us and asked us to come up with something. So to me, it only makes sense to let them know, hey, this is what we came up with. But yes, I'm fine with taking it out as long as they still receive it.
And that's what we did with the DOJ, the AG, and the ISP.
Yeah, that makes sense. I didn't understand. I thought you were saying like, don't give this to them.
Oh.
So yes, thank you for clarifying that, Susan.
So I would move an amendment to remove the Sangamon County Board and from that sentence.
Sunshine.
Yes, that's
Okay.
fine. So do we have to do
It needs a second
separate?
and
Yeah,
and
I
Well,
see.
approval.
but before we do that, do we have to do a different amendment for each suggestion?
Well, so no, we don't have to do a different amendment for each suggestion.
Yes, you do.
Oh,
Okay. Okay, so
are you asking me if we have to? I don't know. We can combine them then.
Can combine them.
Well,
Yes.
Same amendment if you want.
Okay,
I think it's simpler if we do one at a time so we know what, because people may have different opinions on different parts of it.
One person
Okay.
could just recommend it.
I'm sorry?
I
Can
said one
recommend all of
person-
them?
Yeah, just one person can recommend all of them.
let's do that.
And then, well, hold on, while we're at it, on and I apologize, I'm trying to get out of here too, but on 1A, the FOIA request of any public agency personnel file, can we put personnel and internal affairs files? Because sometimes when you ask for personnel files, they'll only just give you like a summary, like a resume, application, and things like that. It doesn't always encompass their internal affairs files.
Done.
Okay, great.
Okay, so do we have track of all the differences? Okay, so we're gonna have to roll this back. And I'll go in my memory bank. Okay, so from the top to the bottom, now therefore be it resolved by the members of the Massey Commission on this 13th day of January 2025 that the Sangamon County Sheriff's Department adopt the following changes to the hiring process at the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office, omitting mention of the Sangamon County Board.
Yes.
Yes. Roman numeral 1A. FOIA request of any public agency personnel file and internal affairs personnel.
Just personnel and internal affairs files.
Personnel and internal affairs file. That's Roman numeral 1A. Roman numeral 2. All applicants at the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office, including entry-level and lateral hires, shall undergo the same hiring procedures, such as testing and background checks. We're good with that. Correct. Okay, Roman numeral 3, employment shall be prohibited for any applicant who A, has a conviction for a Class A misdemeanor within 5 years prior to application. B, has 2 or more Class A misdemeanor convictions in the 10 years prior to application. Or C, has ever been placed on the Brady list. Were there changes in that section?
Is that where we would add like a D for the what was it called? The steroid?
Anabolic steroids.
Yeah, is that where we would add this? Into?
Yeah, that should go under 2, such as testing and background
Oh,
checks. So there should be maybe a 2A.
That implies that all applicants are tested for all other drugs as well, right?
So maybe the statement should read, applicants should be tested for
all illegal substances.
illegal
plus-
substances to include.
Steroid.
And the random.
Anabolic.
Okay.
That's already in there.
Okay.
And then Roman numeral 4 is going to stay as written. The Deputy Mayor Commission shall review all applicants and their background checks and shall formally vote on any offer of employment after the sheriff requests approval to hire. A negative vote of the Deputy Mayor Commission shall preclude a candidate's hire with the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office. No changes in that section. Let's see. Okay. So now we can move to a vote, I believe. Did you
Yeah.
have something, Christian?
No, do we move
Okay,
to,
yeah.
do we make a motion
make
to
a-
approve with the amendments?
Yes,
Oh,
and
I can motion that.
I can
Christian,
second.
Calvin. Okay. Do you want to do a roll call? Yes, no? Okay.
Castles,
Yes.
Christian,
Yes.
Clemens,
Yes.
Espina,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Massey,
Yes.
Phillips,
Yes.
Verboki,
Yes.
Wesley,
Yes.
Wojcicki,
Yes.
Is it? Is it? Okay. So moved. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Hey, any opposed? Okay. Motion is adopted.
So that should have been a vote on the amendments.
Right.
Now we need to vote on the whole.
Oh, okay. Well, we just did. Voting on the entire resolution. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is adopted. New business. Is there any new business to come before the commission tonight?
Just really quick. So before I came here, I was over at the Sangamon County Board meeting. I don't have an update on the recall of the sheriff. It did not pass. Okay. Both, including the second resolution?
It's not killed it.
Even asking Millheiser to,
Millheiser won't even answer that.
oh, wow.
Yeah, they completely ignored you guys. Just as so, they did pass the 708 dose. That did go through.
it did.
Okay, thank you for that.
Whoever.
Let's see here. Chairman Van Meter stated that it was not intentional for them to schedule their county board meeting on the same day as the Massey Commission meeting. He asked if I would relay that to you guys, and he stated that this has been on the book since, well, the county board meeting has been on the book since November. So I'm just passing along a message. Thank you.
Thank you, Calvin. Okay, now we can move to public comment. We will begin the public comment portion of the evening. We ask that the speakers that have signed up line up in order of presentation. This is a one-way comment opportunity, not a Q&A for commissioner response. Each speaker will be allowed to speak for 5 minutes and will be called in the order in which they signed up. Our public comment period is limited to less than 1 hour. So let's begin with our first speaker at the podium, Ken.
I get accused of sounding sarcastic a lot of times, but a lot of that goes into a frustration I have with pretty much every bureaucracy I run into. I just left county tonight. They don't care. They don't care at all. They didn't even bother discussing that referendum for the recall. They knew it was dead 2 months ago when it got submitted. There's a reason they called that meeting tonight, and it wasn't so they could make sure they got on the ballot. That's a load of crap. Van Meter will lie to your face just like he's lied for the last 30 years on board. I would highly recommend, if you guys are going to make recommendations, you show up and back them up with some teeth and call them out for the fact that they don't care. They don't. You want to know how little they care? How many board members show up to these meetings? How many people show up to these meetings? The advertising budget on this is atrocious. Like, I'm literally, until I got here, and the only reason I came is because board was going to end the way I knew it would end. I was the only public speaker. That's a joke, right? Like, does that upset you guys? Your work is being ignored by the community because they're not putting anything behind it. They're literally taking your recommendations and they're largely ignoring them. The only reason they did the 708 is because it's yet another committee and commission they can shove money at and blame for lack of change. It's the same thing they've always done. Go back and look at what they've done over the last 20 years. You're not the first commission they put together for the jail, for the tax commissions, for why they don't spend money on my side of the town. I mean, it's all very easy to notice, guys, because it comes down to one thing. It's a big club, and you're not in it. Quite frankly, we're not white enough. I'm not white enough. My wallet's not white enough. And I'm getting fucking sick of it. Because every board meeting I go to, every commission, I have to listen to the same empty promises. That guy that stood up here and talked about that crisis training, those 40 hours, anyone want to guess who had those 40 hours? I said it at the last commission meeting I spoke at. It was Sean Grayson. So when we talk about these things that they bring up here, it's the same thing they've done since 2003. And where did it lead us? We're standing there. That should upset all of you. People ask me how I stay this angry. How the fuck is nobody else as angry as I am? This is infuriating. I've spent 40 years of my life in this area to listen to the same bullshit promises, to watch people like Van Meter pump fake us straight out of anything happening. That's bullshit. And I get chided for my language or being too upset. And it's kind of hilarious because you know what's really offensive? When I have to listen to people talk to me about upsetting the police or maybe giving them too hard of a demand. Because you know what kind of demands they make of us? Stop or I'll shoot. Freeze, don't move. Those are the kind of demands I get. But we got to send them a letter. Let's be nice, guys. We don't want to upset them. Got to be gentle with the cops. Got to gently nudge them in the right direction. Maybe 20 years from now, they'll just shoot somebody 9 times instead of 43, like they did Amadou Diallo when I lived in New York. That's the frustrating part for me because this is endless. You can try whoever you want up here to say whatever they'd like, but it's going to lead to the same empty results if you don't put some teeth behind your recommendations and start embarrassing people like Van Meter for soft pedaling your recommendations and choking them out right in front of you. If that recall was a baby, he put a pillow over its face and held it till it stopped moving, and he'll smile while he does it because he's done it for years, literally years. The Sangamon County Sheriff's Department has been a cesspool of abuse, racism, drug abuse, traffic accidents, all sorts of problems for decades. And if you doubt me, go learn how to read a newspaper. It's that easy. I don't make this stuff up. No. I mean, it's very simple to see out there, and they will tell you that these recommendations will matter. But just like tonight, go check out the votes. See how many people actually voted for that recall referendum. They don't have the right to tell us no. It's that simple because we're the ones who should be telling them no. No, you don't get to keep holding the power to yourselves. No, you don't get to keep turning a blind eye to murder, abuse, sexual assault crimes, steroid use, steroid use. Oh, they're thinking of adding it. Is that a fucking joke? Steroid use. Does anyone know what roid rage is? It's been like a cultural joke for 30 years. But now we're going to tell our cops, some of them who have arms as big as my neck, that they need to stop taking roids, lest we'll test you guys. I mean, is this a joke? It feels like a joke. It feels like a joke everywhere I go, bro. And it's killing me inside. And I know it has to be killing you guys. I know it kills Sunshine. She sat on a police review board for 3 years. And here we fucking are, making more recommendations for the same programs that did nothing. Because Sean Grayson had 40 hours of crisis intervention training. And what did that lead to? So there we go, guys. When you start making these recommendations, I want you to think about where they really go and who really has the power to tell you no. Because we're not white enough, our wallets aren't white enough, and they're going to remind us of that until we're dead too. So if I were you as a commission, I'd start stepping up a little harder and stop worrying about somebody getting held back for a Class A misdemeanor. Because quite frankly, if you can't follow the law, you shouldn't be enforcing it. Period. Like, period, point blank. I don't care what it is. Because you know who they don't give those allowances for? Black men when they hire for jobs. Women when they go in for positions elsewhere. They don't give us that leeway. They don't tell us that it's okay. They don't say that's a minor crime. You know, my 3 paraphernalia convictions, which were all Class A misdemeanors, prevented me from getting into a lot of places at my young age. Luckily, I managed to grow up into a world where people stop acting like some of that stuff's worth holding me back from advancing. But quite frankly, that kind of mercy isn't extended to young black men and women, or young Hispanic men and women, or immigrants from other countries that don't have legal defenses and fat white wallets and legal defenders. So keep that in mind when we're talking about recommendations or worrying about upsetting the cops. Because I got news for you. I only got one thing to say to the police. Fuck the police. Plain and simple. And what it means, the same thing it meant back in 1987 when they said it. Y'all kill me in my fucking neighborhoods. Murder my friends, you kill my family, you terrorize us for decades. And I say fuck the police and I'm the one who should be held back and quieted and stopped from being offended. I'll tell you what's offensive is the fact that if I go out right now to my car and I get pulled over, I'm scared of being shot. I'm scared of being murdered, but that is nothing compared to the fear that the children who walk in my neighborhood, which by the way, the #1 reason why they pull young black men over in this country, in our city, is because they're walking in the street. That's the #1 reason for police stops. Did anyone see a sidewalk on my south and east side of town get cleaned off by the city who's responsible for them? Did they even clear those streets? I lived on 12th Street for almost 35 years. I've never even seen it get paid or plowed. But that's the number one reason our police forces will stop young black men and terrorize them. So I mean, when we talk about these recommendations, when we talk about that stuff, we spend a lot of good time looking at photos of a bunch of white people telling other white people, you should calm down. I mean, we're kidding ourselves if we think that's going to change anything anytime soon. Because yet again, I will note it one more time, Sean Grayson had 40 hours of crisis intervention training.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Thomas Davis.
I think we should be outraged. I think we should keep being outraged. That's part of the mission here. I think it should be bold in our recommendations. We should be honest in our actions. And that's why, once again, I thought I'd comment because I think the commission has been misinformed. The resolution that just passed was discussed in December by the work group. It was put over until last Monday for further discussion and action. It was not approved at the meeting because the meeting did not happen. It was canceled, and you can't do what was done through emails. So I hate to be the sand in the Vaseline, but this resolution, which you spent a lot of time on, and the commission, don't get me wrong, the commission has the ability to approve, but you've delegated this to the work group, and the work group did not finish its business. I don't care about misdemeanors. I mean, we've got a president with 43 felony convictions.
Yeah, no, do.
But I do care about the First Amendment. This hate group stuff is not legitimate. SPLC? Really? So, it was not approved officially because there was no meeting. Now we've got a meeting in 2 days. So, what is the hurry? Hate groups, yeah. Screw fascists. Screw the racists, sexists, all of these things. But you can't delegate responsibility from the government to the SPLC. It's a private nonprofit, but doing very well. I went and did some research. I sent it to one of the members of the work group. I was going to address the issue during public comment, well, on Wednesday. I guess I will anyway. But I did go to the trouble of coming up with not a position paper, but a summary. What has the Southern Poverty Law Center done over the history, and how much money does it have? And what is its mission, okay? We're making recommendations to the government for official governmental action, and you can't have something in our, well, I guess you can, you just did, but you shouldn't have something in your recommendations, your documentation that indicates that we're delegating authority on hate groups. You got to do it yourself. You got to figure out, what the heck is this tattoo? Can you explain this? What did you mean on that social media post? Those are all legitimate inquiries that must be made. But your actions should be made in accordance with the law. And I hate to do it, but the Open Meetings Act, you know, that's the law. Anyway, let's end on a positive note. I heard that there was a vacancy in the work group, so I put out some feelers. I sent some people my resume, etc. But then now I'm told that, well, you know, we don't really want to fill that vacancy. That's fine. Because not only do I remember what Groucho Marx said, but I remember what LBJ said. And I don't want to go into that. it's something about tents. If you're on the inside of the tent, you can urinate outside, but you don't want people inside the tent. So I can tell I'm losing my audience here, and that's fine. But tell you what I also did was I drafted a lengthy letter to the state's attorney, and I presented that as a draft for consideration by this committee, by the work group, by whomever that you decide to address certain issues. And that's a lengthy letter. I have no pride of authorship. It's got some blanks to fill in. It was intended to be a draft for further discussion and action by the commission. The commission doesn't need the county board's approval to ask the state's attorney. He's going to say no, but you put everything in this letter, you send it to him, and within a short amount of time, you make it public. Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it for the public comment. Now we can move to adjourn. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Bob, Sunshine. Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just like this.